When did you witness something definitely not meant for your eyes? I found my dad's will. I was on his computer while he was at work. I was actually searching for his adult film stash. Anyway, I ended up finding a strangely titled Word document. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. It contained a note to each of his kids. It wasn't until I got to the last one, my youngest brother, that I realized it wasn't just a will. The start of that line read something along the lines of, "If anything's going to make me change my mind now, it's writing this part." I realized I'd found my dad's goodbye note to those in his life. I was about 14 or 15 at the time, and I had no idea how to go about talking to him about it. So I decided to just keep it to myself. He started buying us gifts and stuff, and I'd get really scared and still just keep it to myself. I remember one day on the weekend I woke up in my bed to a loud bang coming from my dad's room. I laid there for probably half an hour, completely frozen. Once I worked up the strength, I went to his room and opened the door. He wasn't in the bedroom, and I was so confused until I saw that the bedroom window was open. What had happened is that there was a gust and the wind had slammed the door shut, but my paranoid brain had heard a weapon shot. After that, I was laughing hysterically, and I don't have much memory of the days after that. Shortly after this incident, my dad had returned most of the gifts he bought us as kids, and I slowly started to believe that he had changed his mind. I never confronted him about it until last year, about 14 years or so later, but I never fully accepted that he was okay now. I called him, distraught about a separate matter, and he started talking to me about depression. He told me about his own, and how he'd considered ending things, and went into detail about it, and all I could do was cry and tell him, I know. We talked a lot longer after that, and we were able to finally put it all to rest. Growing up with my little brother and single mum, we never had a lot, but she made sure we always had a safe and decent place to live, and there was always food on the table. She never really ate much. I remember dinners of baked chicken, beef, stew, salmon. It was a lot cheaper a million years ago. Good food, nothing terribly extravagant, but always nutritious, yet she barely ever ate. When I was 10, I saw her eating PB&J on crackers in her room after dinner. That's when I realized there was never enough food for all three of us. She'd cook what we had for my brother and I, and she'd eat the bare minimum, always out of sight, so that my brother and I wouldn't worry about the actual level of poverty we were at. I never asked for another material thing from her after that night. When I was 8 or so, my babysitter was showing me a video of her time with her boyfriend in Paris. After it blacks out for a few seconds, it suddenly cut to her lying on a hotel bed, completely undressed, legs wide, telling her boyfriend to come get it. She jumped out of her seat to try to cover my eyes and told me to never tell anyone. I have now told potentially thousands of random strangers. And now we broadcast your story even further, friend. You're welcome. And Nanny, I'm very sorry. Sometimes content is hard to come by, so we have to anonymously broadcast someone's love life on the World Wide Web. I was helping my mother-in-law clean out her closet. It was all jokes and laughter until I pulled out an unopened, massive adult toy. We were both paralyzed for a moment, before she slowly took it out of my hands, mumbled something about it not being what she thought it would be like, and that she'd ordered it online. She then backed out of the room and threw it in a cupboard. We then proceeded to clean the rest of the closet. My mother-in-law passed away suddenly a few years back, and I ended up being the one to go through her things for donations because my husband and sister-in-law were too emotional. I found 2 whole drawers of adult toys and homemade movies of the 2 of them that went straight into a trash bag and into the dumpster. I never told my husband. I was driving from West Berlin to West Germany in the late 1980s. My boyfriend gives me the wrong instructions, so I have to take an exit off the autobahn to turn back and get back to the correct exit. On a small country road on which we found ourselves, we see a large truck with a missile on it, surrounded by Russian soldiers. They were as surprised as we were, but just laughed and waved at us, as we got the heck out of there as quickly as possible. My boss forwarded me an email telling me to do something. I noticed the email chain had his bosses on it, so I read through the chain. They'd asked him to rate all of my coworkers and I from best to worst earlier in the conversation. I made the top 3 at least. When I was in college, I worked at an arcade and mini-golf joint that seemed to give 0 Fs about actually making money, but was never in any kind of financial trouble. When I got hired, the owner literally said, "I pay minimum wage and I expect to get minimum work for it." I worked the front counter and collected money for the mini-golf and sold cups of coins, or you could just use the coin changer. The till was completely busted and would be off by $50 or more in either direction, no matter what you did. I realized very quickly that I could just pretend to ring up golf fees and cups of tokens and pocket the cash. So I'd pocket $30 to $40 every shift and nobody seemed to give a crap. One of the assistant managers let me take a break 20 minutes after I'd just taken a break because some of my friends had shown up and wanted to smoke a bowl with me. He was like, "That's totally more important than your job." It was awesome. Then one day I walked into the owner's office while his secretary was recording figures in the ledger. I can read upside down pretty well, and it was very obvious that the figures she was recording had nothing to do with the business we were doing. We sold maybe $60 of golf fees a night and maybe $100 in coin cups, but she was recording $600 and $1,000 for each. I commented on the discrepancy and quipped about how someone would think we were in the laundry business, and she got really squirrely and told me to leave the office. The next day, the owner called me into his office and we had a very circumspect conversation about how much I was enjoying working there and enjoying the perks of the job, and I very much got the sense that he was trying to decide if I was going to tell anyone anything. Apparently, he decided I wasn't, and he was right, I wasn't. So I kept working there. About a year later, the owner was arrested for money laundering and we all got fired. Still the best job I ever had. The mob is an A+ employer, would work in fake business again. You stole from the mob and lived to speak about it. He robbed the mob and kept his job. I used to do a little work after school at a local comic shop. One day after school, I was bagging comics when the owner's buddy came in. "Hey, look at these, they came out great." He had a stack of glossy amateur adult magazines featuring the shop owner, his buddy, and the owner's wife all doing the deed together. He laid them all out on the counter and they started pouring through the stack excitedly. From what I could see, it looked like the three of them enjoyed one another's company equally and vigorously. Then they noticed I was there. I got sent home early with a stack of free comics. I once walked into my dad's van while he was groin deep in a woman who was not my mother. My dad had a drinking problem. Mum took me and my brother to go looking for him because he was supposed to be buying Christmas presents. Found his van at a bar. Mum sent me to look inside the van to see if there were presents in there. Looking into the back and seeing my dad's bare butt as he was going to town on some chick, he turned over his shoulder, looked right at me and said in the most evil voice, "Get out." This was 20+ years ago and I still get emotional thinking about it. I still remember the entire thing so clearly. The other day I was looking for my old passport when I found a few of my dad's old visitors' passports. Now, my dad is older than most, he's 70 while I'm a teen, so imagine my surprise when listed under children in the passport, there's the name of a kid born in the 1970s. The best part is that the name isn't on later passports of his, so I guess I accidentally found out I have a dead half-brother? I caught someone eating a booger while sitting in their car. We made eye contact. He had the 1,000-yard stare. He knew that I'd witnessed. Something a coworker claimed to have seen several months before I started at the company. The big boss man comes back from a site visit and weekend at his cabin, not too far from the site. He has somebody burn all the photos from his camera to a CD and makes a couple of copies. One copy was with my coworker and another guy looking at photos from site. Suddenly, the photos of the site trip end, and there were tasteful undressed photos of Big Boss Man's wife at their cabin on the disc. But wait, there's a twist. Another copy of the same set of photos was currently in the boardroom PC, where Big Boss Man was showing photos to the client. My coworker doesn't know what to do. She tells our lead administrative assistant, who confidently marches into the boardroom and ejects the disc, interrupting the meeting. Big Boss Man asks, "What are you doing?" And she simply says, "There's a problem with the disc," and leaves. Yes, she's amazing, and no, she never got into trouble. She was the second employee that was hired when the Big Boss Man started the company 2 decades ago. This event happened almost 9 years ago, and she's still an indispensable employee. My coworker, who unexpectedly saw his boss's wife's chest, never heard what happened after. Nobody talked about it, and everyone just carried on like it had never happened. Back in middle school, we had this really strange gym teacher who was about 6'2" and ripped. Me and my friend were going to take a dump and thought that the locker room toilets would be clean since nobody used them throughout the day. When we walked in, to our left was one big shower room and there was our gym teacher showering while eating spaghetti out of a Tupperware container. Thank God he was wearing swimming trunks, but he did turn around and say, "You guys aren't supposed to be in here." So he left. Somehow, this is weirder than if the teacher was actually a prevert and doing something illegal. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't think they deserve to be fired or shamed or anything, but it's just so very much weirder that they went to the trouble of putting on a bathing suit specifically to do this stuff. If you wanted the difference between weird or bad defined, this is it. When I was younger, my family went to look around a house we were considering buying. We went into the owner's daughter's room and there was a blow-up, doll on the floor. It was really funny, but we didn't end up buying the house. I was working the night shift, doing post-production on a well-known reality show. I walked into the men's room and found our lady boss bent over the sink, getting done from behind by one of the other night guys. They both looked up, we made eye contact in the mirror, and I closed the door without a word. I never brought it up, but she gave me the next night off, quote, "for all your hard work." You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I went to a co-worker's house to help get the scanner to work, which hadn't worked since her daughter had tried to use it a few days earlier. I tried to load the software, which would hang while trying to connect to the scanner. A quick power cycle of the scanner and the software loaded up. The software defaulted to the Recent Scans screen. The most recent scan was the hoo-ha of my coworker, her daughter, or I suppose it could have been a page from a XXX magazine that just so happened to be exactly what you'd see if you were squatting over a scanner. My hotkey skills were so fast, so I might have Alt F4'd before she saw what I did, but once that software worked, I used a different program to perform a test scan. Easy, but uncomfortable way to earn $20. I saw a Homer Simpson keychain in my mum's desk drawer. I didn't say anything. 2 weeks later, it was in my Christmas stocking, and she goes, "Wow, how did Santa know how much you like The Simpsons?" And that's how I figured out Santa must have been sleeping with my mum. My dad once handed me his tablet and suggested I look at an ebook or something while we were sitting around in a theater waiting for a play to start. I don't know if I misunderstood him or what, because when I brought up his Amazon Reader app, I saw the last book he had been reading was How to Deal with No Whoopee in Your Marriage, or something along those lines. Dad was very embarrassed, quickly took the tablet back, and we didn't speak of what had just transpired. Another time, Dad handed me his phone and asked me to look up something for him, while we were sitting around the living room at a family get-together. When I opened his browser app, the last page open was pornography. The video began autoplaying and I frantically tried to figure out how to close the tab, but all I really managed to do was look at the video for far longer than I wanted to. So I shoved the phone back at my dad and said, "You need to close the tab, I can't figure out how, I'm sorry." And we once again didn't speak of what had just transpired. There was also another couple of times where I went to use his computer and there was either a bunch of adult flicks open in his browser or some kind of porno in the CD tray. My dad is a bit absent-minded, you see. Okay, this was more heard than seen, but I was golfing with my mother's fiancé when he got a phone call. He had his cell volume turned up really high and I overheard a woman who wasn't my mother say some things, including the phrase F and suck in a seductive manner. I convinced myself that it wasn't my business or that I'd misunderstood and I dropped it. A few years later, her now husband was revealed to be a serial cheater with active partners numbering in the dozens. Yes, I still feel like crap, and yes, they're divorced. Alright, here it goes. I was in the 7th grade, so I was almost 12. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard my mum screaming. I jumped up and got ready to defend my mother. I opened up my parents' bedroom door and my mum was, well, she definitely wasn't in trouble. My dad was behind her and they seemed to be enjoying themselves. I didn't understand at the time, but I wanted to get out of there before they noticed me. However, instead, I fainted. That, my friends, is something I definitely wasn't supposed to see. I am forever scarred. I'm 25 now and my dad still likes to bring it up at Christmas dinner. I was bartending and it was slow. I was putting away glasses by the only 2 people sitting at the bar. They seemed like a new couple, really touchy and stuff. At some point I noticed that she was wearing a wedding ring and he was not. Right as the music died down between songs, he turned to her and said, "You know, they're gonna ask you where you were when he drowned." I noped out of there real damn quick. This was 5 years ago now, but from what I remember, they definitely knew I heard them. I was like 2 feet away. I froze for a second, then turned and went straight into the kitchen. I was freaking out with the kitchen staff and trying to figure out what to do. When I came back, they'd paid cash and left. I debated calling the police, but had no other info besides what I'd heard. I freaked out for a few days. I never heard anything about anyone drowning. I didn't keep it a secret either. I've told this story a lot, and this was a small town where people had nothing better to do than talk. So, if there was a scandal, it was common knowledge what I'd heard. When I was 14 and a friend hosted a birthday party at his house with all of the parents invited. Needed to use the restroom, but the main one was occupied, so my friend told me I could use the one in his mum's bedroom. As I walk up to the door, I could hear somebody in there, so I decided to wait until whoever was in there was finished. A good 10 minutes later, my friend's mum, who was hosting the party, and another good friend's stepfather walk out and see me standing there all confused. They asked what I was doing there, and I just said I was waiting to use the bathroom. Surprisingly, they played it cool and just said I could use it now, and they walked off. I saw a couple doing the deed under a secluded waterfall in the woods on a hiking trip with my parents when I was 12. Majestic AF. Look, doing it in the outdoors is awesome, just don't forget the blanket. I saw an employee's check stub that he had dropped. He had been there for a month and was making what I made after my first year, and wasn't a very good worker. So that made me ask for a raise. I got it. I was playing at my friend's house once. His grandparents were staying in his room, and I forgot. I totally ran in on them getting ready to do the deed. It was awkward. You know what? Good for them. I hope that when I'm that age, my partner and I still like each other enough to need to have fun while staying somewhere else instead of waiting for our annual bump at a planned time later in the year. My parents' collection of marital aids. That was way more reality than my 10-year-old brain was prepared to handle. I found my mum's vibratory toy as a kid. She told me it was a neck massager. I still cringe every time I remember this memory. By the way, it was the worst neck massager ever. When I started a new job, somebody had left a bunch of HR files on the computer I was given. I opened one up, not sure what it was, and I got to see every employee's salary in the company, even the CEO's. The next day, it was gone. I guess my boss realized his mistake and logged into my system and deleted the files. It was a memorable experience. Our cat was a little late coming home one evening, which was unusual for him. I went looking for him, calling out his name, not massively loudly as it was late at night in a built-up area. As I walked around a corner to a car park, there he was. He looked like he was just having a bit of a chat with a fox. They looked relaxed, they were facing each other, sitting and chilling out. I called his name and he looked at me, seemed flustered, looked back at the fox, then me, almost as if saying, "He's not with me, I don't know him." I called him again and he chased the fox into the bushes before trotting over to me. I'm pretty sure I crossed an animal line. Similar story. Once I came home at night when everyone else was asleep. My cat was sitting on the chair on the porch and there were about 5 or 6 strange cats sitting on the porch or the steps, all facing him. I watched for a moment and they seemed totally relaxed, all sitting with neutral body language. They heard me and scattered in an instant, and my cat calmly asked to be let inside. He was fat, irritable, and did not give a single F. I from then on assumed he was some kind of cat mafioso. Happened in New Jersey, by the way. I worked at FedEx Express when I was getting my bachelor's degree. I was one of the first people there every morning since I was a handler, and I'd help unload our giant metal cans off a semi. Each can was stuffed full of packages. Well, I'd set up a scanner in order to scan damaged packages so our station wouldn't get charged for it since it was damaged before it arrived. One morning, my manager, who was an alcoholic and pillhead, had me scan these large bags going to the VA. Said it was in case anything was missing. These bags were closed with a Velcro strap around the top, so they weren't very secured. These giant bags were full of pills, and it never occurred to me that anything was wrong. Well, one morning I arrived a little earlier than normal and I was setting stuff up when I heard a tearing sound. It was Velcro coming apart. I didn't think anything about it and I kept working. After about 5 minutes, I heard a thud and looked up to see that manager come around the corner of the can and place a VA bag back onto the ground and walk away. He didn't notice I was there since I was in between 2 trucks in the warehouse. After seeing that, it made sense to me why he wanted me to scan the bags now. The scumbag was and had been stealing pain medication out of the veterans' hospital bags and was using them for his own addiction. I brought it up to a coworker that had worked there forever, in which she told me to just ignore it, unless I had hard evidence like a video or that I actually saw him digging in the bag. If I had anything less and accused him of that, I'd surely be fired since HR gave zero craps about its employees and only protected the managers. Beavis and Butthead Do America. My parents found out we went into that theater and they dragged us out real quick. My 6-year-old cousin asked me if I wanted some chewing gum. I said sure, if she has some. She then goes to her mother's purse and takes out 2 packages of, male protection and asks me, "What do you want, strawberries or banana?" The next thing I know, I'm shoving Durex packages in her mother's purse, saying, "We should firstly ask your mum before going through her things." So the kid doesn't stop there. She takes the purse, goes into the kitchen where the entire family was reunited and asks her mother, "Mom, can I have some gum?" Her mum says she doesn't have any. The frickin' girl takes these rubbers out of the purse and says, "Sure you do. I want the strawberry ones, please." Imagine her mother's embarrassment. On Christmas Eve, I couldn't sleep at all, so I went to the kitchen to get some water or something, and out in the living room were my parents setting out presents and eating the cookies I'd left out. They said that Santa was running late and was in such a big hurry that he just dropped off the presents and asked them to put them out for him. What hijinks do sleepwalkers pull that drive people in their houses crazy? My wife's favorite story to tell is when she woke up in the middle of the night to find me slowly walking out of our bedroom. She asked, "Are you okay? What are you doing?" And I said, "There's someone downstairs in the kitchen, unrolling the tinfoil." "Oh, okay, sweetie, what's your plan?" "I'm going to stop them." "Shall we get a bit more sleep and then both go down together?" Long pause. "Okay." And then I went back to bed. Subsequent investigations found a small plastic bag on the floor near my head being rustled by the movement of the curtain, because the window was open. My ex-boyfriend sometimes talks in his sleep, and the funniest story was this one time I was still up reading a book and I hadn't noticed that he was already asleep next to me. Suddenly he bursts out, "Will you just give me the frickin' yogurt already, Sharon?" in a flawless British accent, and it scared the crap out of me. We're both German, and neither of our first languages include English. We didn't know a Sharon. He's lactose intolerant as well. My boyfriend broke wind very loudly and proceeded to say, "You've got the wrong guy." My girl woke up one night and said, "Did you find your rocks?" And I asked her what she was talking about, and she said, "I don't know, I'm just trying to make conversation," and promptly went back to sleep. She has no recollection of this. My boyfriend woke me up the other day by gently putting his fingers in my mouth, and I kept moving my head out of the way until eventually I was like, "Can you stop that?" He sounded genuinely upset and asked why I woke him up, as he was having a really nice dream about feeding a deer. Brilliant. My boyfriend either recites postcodes, he's a delivery driver, or calls the dog in his sleep. So either he's mad no one's responding to his postcode nonsense, or I get a flying 30-kilo dog to the body. Oh boy, and you can't even close the doors on that one, because then you and the rest of the neighborhood gets to listen to an enormous dog hit the door like a runaway train and then sing the song of its people when it can't get in. My aunt likes to tell the story about her and my cousin sharing a hotel room one time. My aunt woke up, having to use the restroom, and found my cousin sitting up in bed with her arms folded across her abdomen, kind of rocking back and forth and giggling quietly. When my aunt asked her what she was doing, my cousin said, "I'm holding a baby and it has an adult smile." I found this story deeply unsettling. My ex once said, "Horse!" That's all, just the word horse, but with a sense of urgency. The same ex once told me that I sat up straight in bed and mumbled, "Jesus, Grandma, you scared the crap out of me." I'd been dreaming that I was in bed at night and my grandma, still alive at the time, wandered into the room and stood at the end of the bed with a blank stare. So this one time, while my significant other was sleeping, she randomly reached over and started to pet my leg softly. When I ask her what she's doing, she looks at me like I'm stupid and says, "What does it look like? I'm petting this fluffy baby penguin." Then pauses for a second, pats my leg again and blurts out, "Wait, this isn't a penguin." I've never laughed so hard over someone talking in their sleep. Fantastic sleep songs with lyrics which are utterly bizarre. My absolute 2 favorites have been, first, "Oh, whoa, it's a corner rat," and secondly, "Obey my rules and you'll always be a country cowboy." Repeated about 5 times and finished with, "Yeah." My wife started screaming one night that she was lost in the local grocery store, and that no matter where she went, she couldn't find her way out. I asked her, has she tried checking out at the cash registers? She then looked at me and said in her most sincere voice, "That's why you're the smartest person I know," and she rolled over and fell back asleep. One night, my boyfriend woke me up in the middle of the night, tapping me on my shoulder. He put his finger in my mouth, whispered, "Shh," to me, and then pointed at the door and told me, I can hear something. Don't move." Predictably, I nearly crapped my pants. All the worst possible scenarios crossed my mind, and the moment of silence after he shushed felt like hours. Then he started waving his hands and talking about Tetris, the twirlies, I don't know, and making sure we don't align, and that's how I learned my boyfriend talks in his sleep. Oh, hell yeah, take a seat. My wife was an avid sleep talker for a long time, and her midnight announcements range from simple single words to elaborate speeches. The ones that really stand out to me are waking up in the middle of the night to her suddenly sitting violently up in bed, throwing back the covers and screaming, "Tarantula!" That will make you wake up very, very quickly. There was also whispering my name repeatedly, which woke me up so she could share in a hushed, cautious voice, "There's an alligator in here." When I expressed my concern, just playing along, she told me, still whispering, "It's okay, it's been here before." But my all-time favorite was when, from her perspective, as she later explained, she was dreaming that I was playfully sneaking up on her, and she saw me and was calling me out on it. From my perspective, my wife sat up in the middle of the night, staring into the darkest corner of the room, and said repeatedly, in a soft sing-song voice, "I see you." My frickin' blood froze. In short, my wife is terrifying. My grandfather was a hard sleep talker, and my grandmother has a funny story. One day, my grandfather was sleeping and saying, "Do I punch this jerk?" And my grandmother answered, "Yeah, punch him." And then my grandfather hit her in his sleep. I woke up one night when my husband started flailing around in the bed. It shocked me and I shouted, "What's wrong?" And then he punched me in the face. I yelled out and started crying, and he woke up and shouted, "What's wrong, honey?" He'd dreamt he was being chased and then turned around and punched them. Also, my mum, who's in her 80s, she often falls asleep in her chair while I'm visiting her, and she sleep eats. Not real food, but she goes through the motions of holding a plate and bringing it to her mouth. It's hilarious watching her. I asked her once if it was nice, and she said, "Yes, it's very tasty." My girlfriend once yelled in her sleep, "No, no, no, you spunky lesbian. I'm male." I still tease her about it. My ex-roommate talked in his sleep. Once he cried out, "No! Gandalf!" I got this from my wife the morning after the incident. I sat up bolt right in the middle of the night and said, "They're coming. Everything's ready." My wife could only reply, "What?" "They're coming. Everything's ready." "They're coming?" "Mm-hmm." "But everything's ready?" "Yes." "Sounds like we're okay then." Apparently, I comically flopped back down and instantly went back to sleep. My wife was mumbling a lot and suddenly shouted, "Donkey kick!" as she kicked me in my shin, so that was fun. Years ago, my wife was mumbling in her sleep and seemed a bit upset. I wanted to comfort her without waking her up too much, so I said, "Honey, you're fine. Do you know where you are?" She slugged me in the arm and said, "I'm in a place where punch buggies are seen first." And then she rolled over and muttered to herself, "Chugga chugga 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 buggy," and went back to sleep. She didn't remember a thing the next morning. That lady was on an adventure for sure. These people don't need substances. They're taking a wild trip to a crazy place half the time they close their eyes. My mum sleepwalks sometimes. When she was in the middle of her residency, she came into my room in the middle of the night and sharply asked, "Did you give the patient her dose of some medication, like I asked you to 15 minutes ago?" I groggily replied, "Who? What?" She just huffed and said, "Well, I guess that answers my question," before turning around and leaving, without closing the door, of course. She didn't remember a thing about it the next morning. Napping with the boyfriend, a loud noise woke me up, but he was still out. I said, "What was that?" Either a tree or a magic eraser." I've been told that as a child, my father would regularly sleepwalk into his dad's bedroom and go wee-wee in his work shoes. I once did that to my sister as a kid. I slept in a different place than I normally slept in. When she woke up because of what I was doing, she found me in her closet, going #1 on her shoes. She yelled my name and for me to stop. I yelled back something like, "Shut up, get out of here." And then she yelled that I was in her closet, leaking on her expensive shoes. I finally came to and freaked out. I clamped it off and ran back to the bathroom. The icing on the cake was that her boyfriend, now husband, said she could probably just rinse them out. I'd apparently filled both shoes. There was no rinsing. The story gets brought up at every family gathering. My dad used to sleep pee when I was a kid. I learned to check the bathroom floor before I entered. My mom also once caught him in the basement. They have a hole cut into the cement floor next to the washing machine for the sump pump. He was peeing into the sump pump hole. She asked what he was doing, and he said, "Hole number 11." My partner got up, went into the kitchen, ate one bite of a mini pecan pie, no fork, just a straight bite, then apparently remembered he hates pecan pie and left it stacked neatly on the little box. Another time he sat up and stared straight ahead at the wall, didn't respond to me asking what was wrong, then stood up, walked into said wall, and stood there like he was contemplating the barrier. He just backed up exactly as he came, sat down, swung back into bed like nothing had happened. That was so creepy. I've had funnier experiences than this one, but can't remember exactly what was said. Most recently, though, my boyfriend scooted me over to Big Spoon Little Spoon and I snuggled in, thinking that's all it was. Then he gets real close to my ear and whispers, "Just so you know, there's something in the closet. Like a cartoon turtle." I did my best not to bust out laughing and he just said, "Okay, honey." When he woke up, he had no memory of it whatsoever, of course. My dad just screams, "Hey!" a lot. When I was a child about 5 years old, I was sleeping in my parents' bed for some reason. It was probably a storm. My mum was awake, Dad and I were asleep. Suddenly, my father and I have this cross-sleep conversation while my mum lays between us, quietly freaking out. "Dad, you'd better not take my toys," I mutter angrily. "Okay, I won't," my father responds. "Don't even touch them." "Okay." Not particularly scintillating conversation, but notable for the fact that we were both asleep and still responding to each other. It was like making Alexa and Siri talk to each other. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My boyfriend had his tonsils removed a while back, so he was on some pain-reducing substances that kept him sedated and in his words made him a frickin' idiot. He'd had a conversation in his sleep with me about how I shouldn't trust leprechauns because they conned him out of gold coins by giving him foil-wrapped chocolate ones instead. Also, he said not to trust Irish people because they were honorary leprechauns. My younger brother and I used to share a room and used bunk beds. One night I heard him mumble, "I don't create the weather, I just predict it." Oh, my brother in the middle of the night. He'd get up, go into the living room, say some nonsense crap to our parents, and go back to bed. It was actually pretty creepy the first times because he was like, "They are in the walls. They are!" My mum used to wake me up for school because I'd sleep through my alarms. She had a bunch of stories about weird crap I've said to her right before waking. "He's not here. Check down the street. Just put it on the roof and it'll blow away." My younger brother says the most ridiculous stuff. One time he said, "Get off my treasure," in a pirate voice. Another time he said, "Get your hands off my fish." My mum jumped my dad because in her dream there was a thief that stole an old lady out of the hospital. She thought he had to protect the old lady, so she decided to jump on her to protect her from the thief. Then she woke up on top of my dad. My girlfriend was sleep-working one night, saying, "Can we get this done this week?" I said, "What? Can we get this done this week?" "Sorry, can we get this done this week, please?" "Okay, thank you." Honestly, the narrator knows more than a few people who aren't even regular sleepwalkers that do this. It's high-stress jobs, man. Restaurant work has apparently resulted in many otherwise sound sleepers screaming that we're out of lemonade and things like that. 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from my friend in the next street. My 6-year-old daughter had just knocked on her door and then walked in, mumbling about not being able to do her sums. I raced up there and walked home with her, put her back to bed, and she didn't even wake up or remember a thing the next day. By the next night, our house was like Fort Knox. He started shouting that he couldn't feel his left arm. I pointed out he was pinching his pillow, not his arm. He then freaked out that he had lost his arm. I pointed out that his arm was under his pillow. He said, "Okay," and started snoring. It took me another hour to get back to sleep. He didn't even wake up. My missus called me a wriggly little enzyme while she was sleeping. I've never even heard her use that word before. My girlfriend does a bit of sleep talking. I mentioned a sheep character from Animal Crossing, Dom, and she sounded like she was about to cry, saying, "He doesn't have hands." Which, to be fair, he doesn't. One time, my ex was asleep and started to snore progressively louder. He startled himself half awake and said out loud to himself, "Shut up, I'm sleeping." Oh, I snorted my drink through my nose. Oh boy, not my partner, but my brother. I was watching The Exorcist with my dad and my brother, and at the beginning of the movie, some archaeologists find a little statue that releases the devil or something. Anyway, we finished the movie, my brother falls asleep on the other couch, so my dad and I just watch another movie. The second that movie ended, my brother sat bolt upright and walked into the middle of the room asking, "Where's the statue?" And we were like, "What statue?" And he was going, "The statue! The statue!" Eventually, he makes a motion with his hands like he's picking something up, moves it over about a foot, and then puts his imaginary statue back down. He then went right back to sleep afterwards. My dad and I just looked at each other like, what the frick just happened? But we got a great laugh out of it. My boyfriend once blurted out, "You're putting bread in my ears," in his sleep, mumbled something else unintelligible, and then followed up with, "And I'm becoming a sandwich." It still makes me laugh whenever I remember. Roommate, freshman year of college. They were a sleepwalker and sleep talker. We were in the freshman dorms, a small little room. I woke up one night and saw him sitting straight up on the side of the bed, just staring at me, eyes fully open, talking gibberish about golf. He was going on about Phil Mickelson or some crap. I have to be honest, it was creepy as all heck because he was staring directly into my eyes. Next morning I told him about it and he just laughed and said, "Sorry, I tend to do that from time to time." "I'd be the king of Monaco," my wife said this one night out of nowhere. The funniest part was her tone of voice, proud and assertive, like she really was sure of her claim to the throne. Anyway, the joke's on her, Monaco's a principality. My boyfriend sat bolt upright in bed in the middle of the night. He doesn't usually sleep talk, by the way. He said, "There's a thing over there." And I answered, absolutely crapping myself, "What thing?" "Upgrade." I was relieved but very confused. "What kind of upgrade?" "Bag." "Okay, a bag upgrade, alright, carry more stuff." "Yeah." Then he flopped down and began snoring, letting me slowly recover from the massive spike in my heart rate. Your boyfriend sitting up in a dark room and looking at the corner, saying there's something over there, is not fun. Turns out he'd just been playing too many video games. A friend who was next to my room in my high school dorm used to sleepwalk. He also used to sleep earlier than the rest of the floor. So one night, around midnight, we were all up and talking in my room, except for him because he had gone to sleep. We were kind of worried that the dorm advisor would cut our chill session and tell us to go to bed. Suddenly, we hear someone banging on the door of this room. I go to open it, and as soon as I turn the handle, the door comes flying towards me. I was knocked back into a table, and standing there was my sleepwalking friend. He says, "Where is the secret of the time?" And without waiting for an answer, walks back to his room, climbs into his bunk bed, the top one, and goes to sleep. Needless to say, we were all surprised, but being teens, we never let him forget it. It became a running joke in the school. Not a partner, but in military training and school, I often took the night shift for guard duty. The amount of sleepwalkers and talkers is way frickin' higher than I expected. It's straight up creepy when you have to walk down the halls with a covered flashlight, listening to big grown men mumbling and lashing out in their sleep. What takes the cake, though, is often sleepwalkers will just kinda stop randomly. So you'll be walking along in pitch black darkness, and suddenly there's just a guy standing there. Eyes closed, or worse, open, just sorta listing to the side or leaning against a bedpost or wall. After I'd suppress all of the swear words I was about to yell, there was nothing much to do but kind of prod them along back to their bed. For all the randomness that's part of the military, I really didn't expect one of my jobs to be gently tucking my fellow soldiers back into bed. Jesus Christ. Night-walking zombies with sleep conditions and sentries with guns just seems like such a recipe for disaster. Then again, you never hear about anyone dying because of this, so maybe they have a decent protocol for it. My husband woke up in the morning and told me about a crazy dream he had. We were hosting a party and he was serving cookies. He was upset that nobody was eating said cookies. When we went downstairs, we discovered a full plate of cookies sitting on our dining table. Oh, I'm the sleep talker. I don't remember any of this, but my boyfriend said I did this to him. In the middle of the night, I hit his butt hard with my knee. Obviously, he was pretty annoyed. He sat up to stretch, and I said, "I'll stretch too." Did stretches, laid back down. Then, while making full eye contact with him, I grabbed the blanket and threw it off him. Then rolled over and started snoring immediately. We were freshly married and living overseas. My husband hadn't had much sleep the night before, which usually enhances any sleep talking. It was hot in our room. My husband mumbled something which I didn't quite catch. I asked him to repeat it. He got up, opened the bedroom window and said very pointedly, "Airflow, B-word," and then laid back down, completely asleep. Now, my husband has never, not once, ever called me a name or even raised his voice to me, so this was particularly hilarious. My boyfriend is bilingual, and although sometimes I catch him sleep-talking in Punjabi, I've never heard him sleep-talking in English. He also once punched me in the middle of my spine while fully asleep. When he woke up, he claimed in his dream he was giving his mum CPR. He also sometimes suffers from night terrors. It happened often enough when we first started dating, almost every time he slept or napped, but it hasn't happened for probably over a year. It happened like 2 nights ago when he just started screaming like a banshee in his sleep. It was wild and terrifying. When my girlfriend and I started dating, she told me that she had been told she talks in her sleep from time to time, and unfortunately has nightmares fairly often. One of the first nights we spent together, she woke up at 2 a.m., sit up super quickly, and it woke me up. I looked over only to hear her quickly say, "Pizza. Order a pizza," and then lie back down and start snoring within a minute. God, I love that woman. Oh, Mum. She talks and moves a lot during the night. Last week she started running while laying down, yes, just like dogs do, and screaming, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" I woke up in the other room to the sound of my dad first wondering what the frick was going on, and then laughing his butt off when he was telling me what had just happened. My ex-girlfriend woke me up from a dead sleep and said to me, "No trucks, please. Subcompact cars only, please." Upon waking, I relayed this to her and she said to me, "What the frick is a subcompact car?" After watching the Lego movie, I really got into the Batman franchise. The comics, the movies, everything. This kind of peeved my boyfriend. It peeved him so much, in fact, that one night while he was sleeping with his back to me, in a split second he sat bolt upright, turned to me and yelled, "Frick Batman!" right in my face. He then immediately slumped back down and continued snoring. What's the most surprising trade secret about your job? I managed boarding and grooming kennels for 8 years. The secret is that the employees actually do love your pets too, even the difficult ones. Most of us realize they just miss their people. The number of times I've wept when a pet died, or spent way too many hours comforting a dog with separation anxiety, or spent hours off the clock with a boarder who needed to be rushed to a vet office, I wouldn't trade it for the world. Some pets do just suck though, not gonna lie. I'm a server. No matter how much we insist it's okay that you're keeping the entire restaurant open after we've closed, please know that we are 100% lying. We will get fired if we deviate from anything other than pure delight that you're keeping us from going home. We dread it. Please don't believe us. I used to work in jewelry. Most of the prettiest gemstones are also very affordable. Tanzanite is a beautiful purple and looks nicer than amethyst. Topaz comes in lots of colors, including a pretty blue color which can be as nice as aquamarine. Opals aren't as brightly rainbow-hued as they look in pictures. Almost every hairstylist gets the heebie-jeebies when we shampoo your hair and you just stare up at us. Close your damn eyes at the shampoo bowl. I used to screen resumes for small companies. Job requirements are more of a wish list situation. Never let some unchecked boxes deter you from applying. You have no idea what the applicant pool is like. The biggest boon, especially at small companies, is someone who legitimately cares. My company once put out a job vacancy for a position that would assist me in my job. Looking purely at the job requirements, I didn't feel like I was qualified to assist myself in a job I've been doing for 2 years. If you're looking for work and a job seems even remotely like you could do it, apply anyway. It's not like you have anything to lose. There is way more butter than you think in almost every dish you eat at fancy restaurants, and that's usually the reason you won't see the amount of calories in each dish. My source? 5 years as head chef in Italian cuisine, 8 years in an Italian kitchen. I'm an attorney. The secret is shut the F up. As the narrator of many videos where the clients in question immediately stuck their foot in their mouths and incriminated themselves, I'd say that this commenter is probably right on the money. I worked for the biggest mast contractor in Virginia for 8 years. They're the company that owns Bath & Body Works, and they're a division of L Brand. There are so many fragrances that are rebranded and recolored to a different flavor. Fragrance oil is absolutely 100% the most expensive part of any shower gel or foaming soaps that we made. Odds are they have hundreds of thousands of pounds of these oils in warehouses all over the US, so they just rebrand it as something else. It's not like they're going to scrap it. Also, all of this crap you see on the labels of shower gels and foaming soaps that say enriched with vitamin E or contains aloe vera extract is absolute complete frickin' bullcrap. We made our batches in sizes 40,000 pounds. In a 40,000 batch, you had about 2 ounces of vitamin E you'd add to the batch, and barely enough aloe extracts to get it out of the frickin' cup to add it to the batch. They add the bare minimum to have it on the label, as required by the FDA. Foaming soaps are also about 65% water, so they make an absolute killing selling those. Let me tell you that some therapists and counselors are on the wrong side of the couch, so to speak. If you feel your mental health provider is unhinged, they may very well be. A family member tried to break up with his long-term girlfriend, who was a therapist. I was shocked at her absolutely unhinged behavior, which included, but was not limited to, her taking his childhood teddy bear, chopping it up with garden shears, and piling it up on his bed with the note, "This is what you're doing to my heart," stabbed into it with a steak knife. I work with central heating. Change your dirty furnace filters and clean your AC coils outside. These make up an easy 30% of my calls for no heat or cooling. At Goodwill, 50% of what you donate ends up in the trash because we don't have the space for it or we just deem it too ugly to sell. I work in Elkhart, Indiana, which is the RV capital of the world. All I'm saying is there's a reason no one who works in the RV industry owns an RV. The quality is rubbish on all the major companies, the big ones being Thor, Forest River, and Grand Design. These 3 companies own probably 90% of all RV companies, so check with who owns what you're buying. There are some mum and pop shops that do put out good products, but these are pretty few and far between. As a software engineer, you double your delivery date for a product in anticipation of an over-eager project manager trying to get promoted. I always pad the due date and then get it done ahead of the deadline, and my clients love me. Former aircraft fueler. Don't check your pets into your flights, especially in summer or winter. They're submitted to some very harsh environments, left on belt loaders in the sweltering heat right next to a running APU that's loud enough to deafen human ears, let alone a dog's. It's terrible. I always feel so sorry for those pooches. American Airlines will destroy your luggage, they get overloaded on carts, fall off on the way to the plane, and they're left there to get run over by tankers and yes, fuelers and rained on, then dragged to the edge of the ramp to sit all night while you arrive at your destination and wonder where the hell your bags are. If your departure is delayed, 90% of the time it's us, the fuelers. Look out the window to the right side if it's a small plane, left side if it's a really big plane. If there's a truck sitting under the wing, we're the reason you're late. Sorry. The industry-leading software is at least 10 years old at its core. We had an engineer essentially beg, borrow, and steal his own work hours to rewrite an entire facet of our software to be independent of the 8-year-old core we'd outgrown 5 years ago. And as soon as he had done that and written a nice utility for testing that was now possible, meaning we didn't have to spin up so many services in local environments, we got a ton of work in that area of the software. Like, I'm still working on it and he's already moved on to another company. The debt he erased and the tool he created, it's like we're 60% better and faster at everything. Plus the morale factor. We would have drowned without that work. We miss you, MT. The best therapists go to therapy. The cheapest bottle of wine in the restaurant has the biggest markup. You'd be surprised at how willingly someone will do their job and even go above and beyond if you just compliment them for their professionalism, politeness, and how they're helping them. Worked at a department store photography studio owned by a major photography company that you can imagine probably took your school yearbook photos. The company was also partnered with a popular online photo order website. You ever notice how quickly we write down a price, strike it out and write a new price as the deal? Yeah, that's pretty much just the price that everyone gets. We aren't doing math that fast, we have it memorized because almost everyone that comes in has that 40% off coupon. Don't come in without a coupon because there's always a coupon on the website. If you end up paying for sitting fees, it's because you just didn't go to our website. Honestly, don't buy our photos. If you just do the session and then say that you'll buy them online later, on said partnered photo order site, it will be cheaper than if you buy them in store that day. Yes, even when we say, oh, but you won't get this deal online. If you do buy in studio that day, just buy the digital CD of your photos. You get to keep all of them instead of having to pick your favorite 3 or 4 pictures. Oh, and again, it's way cheaper to take that CD to a photo kiosk and have them printed yourself. Please don't spend $400 on a couple of photos that you can't legally copy when you could just get an $80 CD of all the photos and have the copyright to them. The narrator assumed that this comment would be like 15 years old or something, but it looks like it was posted as late as 2020. But the more I think about it, even with the advent of amazing camera phones and filters, family photos probably still need a professional in studio from time to time. Wild how much money you can save though. Thanks for the tip. Not an industry I work in per se, but I used to be in a sales role. One of my customers was a milk bottling plant. I was somewhat surprised that they were putting the exact same milk in both organic and non-organic cartons. Turns out, all of their milk is organic, but in order to not miss out on the sales of non-organic milk, they just bottle them differently and sell them at different prices. Construction boy here. If your windows or sliding doors are tough to open and close, 9 times out of 10, we put your own dish soap on tracks and the thing works perfectly. It takes 5 minutes and we charge $150. Dish soap, people. It's better than WD-40 sometimes. Amusement park ride operator here. If your kid is crying and you want us to stop the ride, even if we want to, it's not gonna stop immediately. The carousel will spin a few more circles or the ship will swing a few more times before stopping. The only exception is the emergency stop, which will absolutely mess up the ride, potentially causing mechanical damage if we press it. Hence, we only use it in actual life-threatening situations. The best thing you can do is try to get your kid to calm down as the ride comes to a stop. And no, yelling, "Stop the ride" at us doesn't make it stop faster. Nobody uses bots to inflate metrics more than the most major players in the entertainment industry. All the numbers are fake, including sales. Everything at the Container Store exists and is cheaper at Lowe's. Companies lie to their customers about saving their credit card information because they aren't supposed to. They'll also save their social, addresses, and 5 of their most recent phone numbers and bank account numbers. I know this from my life as a student loan servicer. If in doubt, lubricate. I'm a machinist. I'm a teacher. If you, as a parent, will read with your child often and early, your child will thrive in school. I'm talking daily books read together from newborn to about 3rd grade. Every single day, no teacher can really replace that. Of course, there are always exceptions, such as dyslexia and learning disabilities. So here's another industry secret. Your child won't always fit the school model. Teachers know that, and that's okay. We're all just people, after all. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. RV technician here. Stuff is designed to start breaking after about 44 uses. Most RV owners use their trailers on weekends, but not every weekend, so that 44 uses on average stretches between 2 and 3 years. Every client seems to think architects are unnecessary and that they can just draw up the plans themselves, but they're just too busy. At Goodwill, we don't clean anything that we sell, and we get some really gross stuff that touches everything else, so next time you buy something from Goodwill, wash it well. The weight loss industry. This might be obvious, but most of our business comes from return clients after they've gained their weight back, and then some. To be clear, the plan isn't rigged to make you gain it back, but the fact that it happens easily as a result of dieting does keep us in business. Audio engineer here, a few seemingly obvious things to point out. 9 times out of 10 with a studio, you get what you pay for. You have to pay for years of experience, acclaimed expertise, plus hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment and software tools, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of dollars that went into the acoustic engineering of the physical recording space alone. People walk into great studios, bulk at recording $1,000 plus for a song, but don't realize they're getting access to close to $1 million in tools, plus an engineer who's going to make them sound better than real life. On the flip side of that coin, be wary of eye candy. Don't be fooled by big mixing consoles. Sometimes they're not even used for your music. Heck, sometimes they don't even function. I've seen studios where the sole purpose of a large board is to dupe unsuspecting musicians into parting with their money. In larger studios, bands with smaller budgets are often stuck with an intern who may not even be getting paid. If your music is crap, no amount of production is going to make it a hit. As a small studio owner, I only share work that I think will bring me more business. Wondering why I haven't shared your music? It's because it's garbage. Billie Eilish recorded on budget equipment at home with her brother. Those recordings were then worked on by some of the best engineers in the world to make it sound like it wasn't. Be wary of a record label. They might offer to front the costs of your recordings and touring, but you have no creative control over your sound, where you record, your tour schedule, and usually the label will own your music. Oh, and you have to pay all of that money back to the label afterwards. Be cautious of studios that claim so-and-so recorded here. There's a studio in Iowa that claims Slipknot recorded here, and while it's true that Slipknot did record in that building, it was a different owner, different engineers, and some different equipment. You're not going to sound like Slipknot by recording there. Sorry. A lot of successful artists at a certain level of success do nothing more than create a concept and employ several assistants who are either current or graduating art students who actually make the art itself, its reproductions, or both. I know this is old news in the art industry and academy, but outside of it, I found it very hard to explain my job to people. I do believe that films also romanticize this field and warp what a lot of outsiders think it actually is. Well, I think this should be pretty obvious, but for big brand hotels, if you try to sneak above the hotel and call the corporate customer care line to demand compensation or complain, that customer care line will always call the hotel for the full story and not just blindly give compensation. As a former TSA worker, airport security is a lot of theatre. TSA is constantly failing plainclothes inspections. I worked with a guy who got fired because someone showed him an ID with a picture of Mickey Mouse on it, and he let the person through because he wasn't paying attention. I work in aviation as well. TSA is tested by something called red teams. They basically try to get things past security. The red team success rate is in the 90% range. Okay, so the narrator knew that the TSA was famously ineffective and more meant as a deterrent, but 90% fail rate? Come on! Why am I being pulled over literally every trip I go on for nothing if they're letting Mickey Mouse onto the goddamn plane? In Microsoft Office, Word specifically, you can upload recorded interviews and it will transcribe it, and even have speaker 1 and speaker 2, 3, and 4, basically eliminating a huge annoying part of the job. Okay, I'm adding this in post. You do need to be subscribed to Office, and then when in Word, there's a dictate button. If you click it, dictate and transcribe should pop up. Click transcribe. Yes, it's not perfect, but for a reporter who's transcribing all day long, it's definitely the most annoying thing ever that I dread doing on a daily basis. Learning this skill changed my life. Healthcare. Homemaker. If your grandparent or parent gets in-home care, please know that your family member could live in a cockroach-infested house and not have to move if they didn't want to. It's not up to the company to give your loved ones environmentally safe places to live, it's up to the family. They can certainly try to persuade, but they can't force. Why do I know this? Because I've been to the cockroach-infested house where an 80-year-old woman lives. I have a mentally ill client that put bleach in his dog's water to help with its breathing. I have a client who never cleans his cat box. I have a client who has a caved-in ceiling. I've called it in, but there's no help from the company. All they say is, there's nothing we can do, it's up to the family members. It's a sad, sad thing because there are so many family members and friends who really don't give a crap how some of their relatives are living. Sure, they'll visit, but do they clean the litter box? Do they make sure there are no cockroaches? Do they make sure the house is stable and not falling apart? Nope. They say they care and that they love the person, but they don't care enough to make sure they live in a healthy environment. It really worries me because if I imagine my own mother having such a deteriorated mind and there were no other family members to help her, she could live in a run-down, cockroach-infested house if she was stubborn enough. It frustrates me because whereas the client does have rights, should they really have the right to live somewhere where their health could be at risk, where their caregivers could be at risk as well? I understand that there are different perspectives. I'm well aware that many elderly or mentally ill people are severely stubborn and won't let you help. I know because I care for these types of people and hear about them often. I'm not disregarding your struggles. I simply wrote this post when I was overwhelmed and stressed from work. I've met many families who care for them, and bless you all who do. We need more of you in the world. Federal HR here. If you put the words from the vacancy announcement about what you need to qualify in your resume, you'll almost always be qualified. We search for those words instead of reading an entire resume. I'm a musician. It's not really a secret, but 90% of our revenue is from merch. Spotify plays, show guarantees and things, everything is menial in comparison to shirt sales. In fact, a big reason bands tour as often as possible is because we can sell more shirts when we're in front of people. The kind donations people give, hoping they go directly to the clients and shelters, actually end up at the Salvation Army or Goodwill to be resold, even though we're instructed to tell them that that won't be the case, and this is done before the clients are given the chance to decide if they want some of the donated stuff. As a beginner counselor straight out of school, I worked with a lot of children and adolescents. Consistently, the discussion with my colleagues was how it was the parents who were the biggest problem and the kids were just adapting to a crazy environment. Library worker here. The majority of donations we receive do not end up in circulation, on our shelves. No matter how much you demand we put them there once they're donated. The reason why this is because we only add items to the collection that we think will be checked out. Most libraries get funding based off statistics. We don't want to waste shelf space on items that people aren't checking out, as it won't improve our stats. So, unless the donated items are brand new or by popular authors, we won't be adding them to the collection. We also weed out unpopular items from our collection with extreme prejudice for this very reason, much to our patrons' horror. These books usually end up being sold at book sales to help generate funding for other library programs. Also, a lot of librarians will waive your fines if you have an excuse and you don't ask too frequently, even large fines. Librarians don't care about your fines and they aren't judging you. Please come back. We'd personally have more fines than you. Librarians are always overdue with their books. I'm a fossil replicator, and apparently the industry secret is just the fact that we exist. So many people are blown away to learn that most fossils they see in museums are replicas. Plumber here. There's no such thing as a flushable wipe. The package is lying. Your drains will clog and fast. Your landlord will charge you and it's gonna suck. Just throw wipes in the trash if you use them. Toilet paper is the only acceptable wipe to throw away. Not a secret at all, just common knowledge somehow. Firefighters are trained in several areas and can specialize deeper into certain disciplines. Most of the emergencies we get called to are situations that we've never been trained in, but with 4 of us on a fire truck, we can normally figure out a solution. I'm a dentist. Here's the lowdown on toothpaste. As long as it has fluoride, they're all basically the same. Once when I was in dental school, the Colgate lady came by and said that everything that says Colgate Total on it is exactly the same. The only difference is the packaging. So whether it says whitening or gum protection or whatever else it is, it's all exactly the same. The exception is sensitivity toothpaste, typically. It does have an extra active ingredient, KNO3, which helps with sensitivity. Don't ever feel obligated to buy the expensive toothpaste because you think it will be better for your teeth. Just buy whatever you like best. Auto insurance agent. Please, for the love of God, don't tell auto insurance agents more than you have to. They ask you a question, you just say yes or no, and answer the question as straight as you can. If you go on and on about your life story, you'll probably end up saying something you don't have to and making your rate higher or getting yourself declined. We want to get you that policy as cheap as possible, just only tell us what we need to know and don't say anything else. Those fruits and veggies you buy at the grocery store? Wash them. What's the most crazy plot twist in the life of a cop? I think my dad's best plot twist came from early in his career when he was still pretty much a rookie. He and some of the others got called to a house to follow up on an old woman who was suspected to have passed away. When they got there, they found out that she was a big-time hoarder with stuff stacked to the ceilings and paths leading to each room barely big enough for one person. While my dad was walking around taking all of this in, one of the other officers suddenly puts his hand out and tells my dad to stop right where he was. Dad asked why, and the officer said, "You almost stepped on her." My dad looked down to find the old woman dead and buried under her own stuff. I used to work as a cop on the Sisseton-Wahpeton Reservation in South Dakota. Loved every second of it, from playing stoop with the little kids, where we'd sit on the front steps of someone's house and eat snacks, to finding all of the different loopholes to get someone help. I miss it, but it's not conducive to family life either. My favorite so far has got to be the tale of the UFO/aliens. I was a cop on the reservation for a while and had my fair share of crazies. One night I was driving around and I got a call from dispatch. There's a UFO out in one of the farmers' fields. Okay. So I get to the house and talk with the guy. We know each other. He doesn't seem to be that loony. I turned my spotlight onto said field and sure as crap, there was something not quite right there. It's metal and stuff. So I go beat-bopping through the furrows and hoping my scarediness isn't showing because this is pretty freaky. It's an autumn night with the wind howling and clouds blowing overhead. I get closer, I have one hand on my holstered gun and the other shining my flashlight. I was rehearsing what I was going to say to our new overlords and then my brain finally clicks as to what the frick it actually was. A wad of those stupid mylar balloons, all blown up and caught on some weeds. I'm talking like 20 of those motherfrickers, just chilling and scaring the crap out of me. I grab them and walk back to the farmer. He started laughing and then I did too. I handed them over to him and got back in my squad, still shaking. The sad part was he passed away a few years ago and his family gave me those deflated balloons that he had kept. I have them in my basement now. Haha. Well, it was a story for the kids and grandkids anyway. Also, I love how completely this cop invested himself in representing the human race on Ground Zero. I honestly think that if it was me and I genuinely believed there were aliens there, I'd be sprinting out and trying to find someone in any way more qualified than a YouTube narrator to establish first contact. Former cop. I was on rookie duty and I got this call that a man got his foot caught in a garden tiller and was bleeding profusely. It was a 20-minute drive running code, so I had time to plan out my actions. I figured the ambulance would be about 10 minutes behind me, so I was going to tourniquet above the knee and assumed he'd be unconscious or needing CPR. I got there, and it was a huge farm building with two guys just standing there smoking. I grabbed my medic bag. I'm not a medic, but it had a tourniquet, C-collar, and gauze. I ran towards them to ask where the patient was, and they were white as a ghost, just smoking and pointing behind them. I went inside and behind a big John Deere tractor was a huge PTO-driven tiller about 7 feet wide and 3 feet tall. There was my victim with his back against the tractor tire, his left leg sucked in the tiller and wrapped twice around it with the sole of the shoe next to his face and his toe pointing towards the left. His femur shot out underneath the tiller and was beautifully white with no blood. He looked at me and said, "Can you help me?" Now keep in mind I was 21, thought this was a garden tiller and assumed I'd be able to do something. But I was completely out of my element. 2 ambulances, the rural fire department extrication team, a welding company to cut the machine apart on scene, a helicopter and a surgeon that came to amputate on the scene later, and the poor guy was finally free. A couple of months ago I got a QA or questionable activity call. It's a catch-all term for anything suspicious. The caller stated she believed someone had snuck into her backyard, climbed up into her second-floor deck, and then left an imprint of their Johnson on her sliding door. I showed up to the call about 5 minutes later, and she's mad at me because I didn't schedule an appointment to come over and her kids saw me. She didn't want her kids to think something bad had happened, apparently. After we got past her anger towards me for showing up, she showed me the glass sliding door in question. In all fairness to the caller, there was a sizable smudge and imprint on the glass. However, the imprint looked nothing like any man's member that I've ever seen. In fact, it looked really similar to the dead bird lying on the deck next to the door. When I pointed out the dead bird and explained my belief that no man's eggplant had been placed on her door, the caller became incredibly irate and told me she moved to our city because it was supposed to be very safe, but now she was thinking of moving away because undressed people throwing dead birds at her house was more than she could handle. Realizing that I wouldn't be able to rationalize with Wacky McDeadbird, I left and wrote my report. Some people don't deserve to call 911. My dad told me that one time he went to a house and a woman pulled something out of her shopping bag and started hitting him with it. He was trying to stop her, but the other officers were all laughing. Finally, he realizes she's beating him with a marital aid. One time we got a call about a minor wreck in a highway corridor. We get there, I'm handling the accident. 100 yards down there is a car on flats, and another one further down from that, unrelated to the accident. One of the drivers walked back to us and told us a sketchy guy had been stopping at these cars to offer his help in fixing the flats. The theory was that he threw something on the road to flatten the tires so that he could help and get money from the drivers. I'm stuck at the back end of this mess on the radio trying to get another unit to detain the shady guy. All of a sudden, I look over and there's a guy in nothing but a hospital gown and an IV hanging out of his arm, just toodling along the shoulder. The nearest hospital was miles away, so I have no idea how he covered that distance with nobody watching. So, here I am with 1. A car wreck, 2. A guy possibly flattening tires on purpose, and 3. An escaped hospital patient. All completely unrelated on a major highway late at night. A friend of mine is a cop in the UK, and his story is more what the frick as he saw it unfold, but missed how it started. It was his first week out on patrol, and he was assigned to an experienced partner. They responded to a burglary in progress, and they were told that a nearby dog unit was on the scene already. When they arrived at the property, they heard a commotion outside that was clearly between an officer and a suspect. They opened the garden gate to assist the dog unit. What they then witnessed was a suspect face down on the grass, an officer stamping on the suspect's back whilst holding his arm up near her hip, and shouting, "Stop resisting!" and the police dog absolutely going to town on this guy's buttocks with his teeth. The suspect is, unsurprisingly, struggling and resisting, and then ends up kicking the dog. The dog then latches onto the guy's leg, starts furiously tugging, pulls it off, and then runs towards the new cops on the scene with his leg. It turns out that it was a false leg, which no one except the suspect knew at the time, and my buddy the cop said he just froze whilst trying to figure out how the heck he calls this in and whether or not he should retrieve the man's leg from the police dog. You know what? I'm going to say that whether innocent or guilty, if there was a dog clamped onto my butt, I'd probably be resisting too, even if I didn't mean to be. You can only peacefully sit out so many canine teeth in your rear end. This reminds me of an incident that happened to a nurse friend of mine in Worcester, Massachusetts, in the late 70s. There'd been a lot of gang violence recently that involved machetes. A guy from one of the gangs got hacked up and was brought into the ER where my friend worked, and the staff were warned to be on the lookout because there was a chance the rival gang would send someone in to finish him off. A lot of the family members were crowded around the guy, weeping and wailing, and my friend had to squeeze through them to adjust the guy's IV. As she brushed by one man, she felt something metal in his sleeve and immediately notified security, who came in and frisked the visitor. Turned out he had a prosthetic arm. My friend was mortified. I found 3 kids, one running next to a busy highway. The oldest kid was 5. We finally got them identified and figured out where they lived, about a mile away. We got there. They were in the care of their adult, 20-year-old-ish sister while their parents were on vacation for 2 weeks. The sister decided she'd rather pop Xanax and smoke green herb than deal with kids, so she locked them in their bedroom for about 10 days, occasionally sliding food and water past the door. There were stains on the baseboards in the bedroom from where the kids decided their bathroom should be, and finally the 5-year-old had had enough and figured out how to unlock the bedroom window and make a break for it. That's nowhere near the darkest stuff I've seen. We don't like to talk about it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. This is my uncle's story. He's not a cop, but the call was sent to the fire department instead due to strangeness. The truck was sent on a call for an unknown disturbance, which basically means anything in the world. They get sent an address, and that's pretty much it. The truck drives down the street looking for this address, and they get to the end and all they can see is an abandoned lot with nothing but bushes. Even though they can't see anyone, they have to get out and investigate, so my uncle and a couple of guys get out of the truck and start walking around with the usual "Fire department, call out." They didn't hear anything for a while and were about to pack it in as another pointless prank call when my uncle walked past a bush and heard rustling. He looks over and sees a man standing kind of awkwardly behind a bush. "Hey, Mr. Fireman, did you call 911? Yes, sir." My uncle steps a bit closer and realizes how the man is completely in the buck and standing at a strange angle. He motions to another firefighter that he found the caller and goes behind the bush to begin assessing. He's a firefighter and paramedic. That's when he realizes that the man has what he refers to as a fricking bunny tail on his butt. Of course, they try to get the man to explain why he'd called in distress and what was going on. After a bit of avoidance, the man finally admits that he'd taken a toilet brush and shoved the handle up his butt. Honestly, no idea why anyone would think this was a good idea generally. Being the enlightened individual that he is, he chose one with a hook on the end, to hang it up in the bathroom, I guess. What my uncle and the other firefighters assumed was that the hook had gotten stuck on something internally because they couldn't pull it out, and it caused the man significant discomfort when they tried to. My uncle left the man with another firefighter, getting his information, and went back to the truck to call for an ambulance. Of course, at this point, he always mentions that he walked around the truck to see the rest of the company, trying to silently die of laughter out of view of the bush. When the ambulance arrives, my uncle greets them with a grin on his face and tells them to brace themselves before walking them over to the bushes. They assess the man and conclude that there's no way for them to remove the toilet brush on the field, and they have to admit him to the hospital for surgery. The only problem was they couldn't figure out how to get him into the gurney without causing him to move in a way that caused him even more pain. They ended up throwing a blanket over him, and the firefighters help maneuver him into a sort of downward dog mountain position with his bum in the air to keep the toilet brush at the right angle. At that point, my uncle decided that the fire department was done with the call and the paramedics could handle it from there, and loaded up the company onto the truck. As they began to drive away, he said, "They were loading this guy into the rig as we drove off, and last I saw of him was that blanket falling off and that damn bunny tail of his sticking straight up in the air." My uncle did follow up on this call with a friend at the hospital. The brush was removed surgically due to the hook getting stuck on something internally, causing the man to have some serious health complications. You know, I thought moving away from the hospital stories would get me away from the constant barrage of people tripping and falling on these sorts of objects. Seriously, guys, it's fine to be curious about these things. Just buy the proper toys, order by mail to a Dropbox if you're so damn worried about what other people think, and go to town when you get home. You're less likely to have an accident and you won't end up on the channel. Well, probably, anyway. I used to be a cop. We got a call from a guy who claimed to be the victim of a robbery and was incapacitated in his home and had only just managed to reach his phone and call us. We arrived to a trailer home that was totally empty except for a man in hardcore leather gear tied to some sort of swing. I mean, there was nothing else in this place except for this guy tied to the swing. Nothing. No furniture, not even curtains. Okay, dude, what the frick? He says, "Well, you see, officer, I hired 2 Asian working girls to whack my butt while I was in the swing. Nothing illegal there, as I didn't technically pay them to do the deed with me. Just some hearty slapping and they're to leave. Well, the girls arrived, tied me to the swing, then 2 Asian guys showed up, beat the living crap out of me, and then pulled up a U-Haul trailer and stole literally everything that I own before leaving me hanging here with my cell phone because they said they knew nobody would believe my story anyway, but the cops would probably chase them for a murder. I still don't know if I believe his story, but I never found any evidence to suggest he was lying either. I just didn't find anything at all." In high school, I took a criminology course as an elective, and our teacher was a retired officer. When we asked him for his weirdest story, he told us about a repeat offender. The offender was a homeless gentleman that had a penchant for exhibitionism. He said he got a call out for someone exposing themselves in public, and when he arrived on scene, he found said gentleman with his ankles to sky, undressed as the day he was born, with a half-empty bag of avocados and a can of Crisco. After taking him to the station, they found the other half of the avocados strewn about the back of their cruiser. Not a cop, but worked as a park ranger. Came up on a scene with blood everywhere, hoofs sticking up out of a styrofoam cooler, a truck bed full of blood, beer cans everywhere, and an antelope head on the picnic table. Perfect welcome to a campground full of children. Too many to choose from. I forget them all. So how about the non-fatal ones that are kind of upbeat? Car in a pond. A guy bought the car, hated it, and got so angry that he literally drove it into a pond and then left. Ticket for littering because I jumped in to see if anyone was in the car. Another car wrecked in a tree. In a tree, like up in the middle of the branches. I just don't know how. Half-missing, decomposing dead body from natural death. Turns out the many cats in the house ate half that person. Okay, that one was pretty grim. A ride-along had a warrant and got tased by the officer they were with, trying to run from them. That was more of a what the frick moment hearing it over the radio. A guy going through a divorce deciding to renovate his house at 2 a.m. with a sledgehammer by taking out all the walls and furniture because his future ex got awarded the house. I didn't arrest him, it was still his house, just told him to keep the noise down, please. I used to be a cop, and one day I was dispatched to a home invasion robbery in progress. Once I arrived, I entered the house, where several people ranging from senior citizens to young children were zip-tied wrists to ankles. They said in Spanish that the homeowner was in one of the bedrooms and that he got some shots off at the suspects. I went to that bedroom, and just inside the door was an adult male laying face down. I rolled him over, and he was obviously dead from having been shot 7 times, including one in the forehead area. On the other side of the room was the homeowner. He was still alive, and he'd also been shot 7 times, but none were fatal. He was still clicking his empty weapon. He kept saying, "I got those motherfrickers." Apparently what had happened was that the whole family was in the living room when 4 suspects kicked open the front door. The homeowner said he ran to his room to get his piece to defend himself as they were coming in. He said he had to load it, so while they zip-tied the family, he hid in his room. After a few minutes passed, the dead suspect and the others started searching the rooms. He said when they got to his, he stood up and they opened fire on each other. The homeowner said 4 people shot at him, and he didn't know how many he hit. He also said he didn't know he'd been hit at first, but when he tried to chase the suspects as they ran out, he collapsed. He was hit in both his legs, the abdomen, and his left arm. The guy was such a bad motherfricker, and he survived the incident. He had actually hit all 4 suspects, 1 died and the others showed up at 2 different hospitals about an hour later. The idiots didn't wear masks, so the family was able to identify them. They got life in prison. I personally think they were going to kill everyone, and that's why they didn't wear masks. They targeted the specific house because it was harvest season, and the house had hundreds of pounds of processed Mary J in different stages of packaging on the property. Some was hanging to dry in a barn, some was in a big pile broken up in a bedroom, and the rest was packaged in shipping boxes ready to be moved. When this happened, recreational devil's lettuce wasn't legal yet. The homeowner grew it for a medical dispensary but was way over what he was allowed to grow. Not me, but my dad is a cop. They went into an apartment to get a dead man and had to check his ID card. It said he was a Caucasian expat from the UK, so they were confused as to why the body they'd found was that of a black man. As it turns out, his body had just turned entirely black because he had been dead for so long. The newbie that they made retrieve the body vomited and fainted, but apparently newbies are made to retrieve bodies, so he had to do it once he recovered. Good God! How long does a body have to be decomposing to completely change color? That newbie would be justified in leaving and never coming back, to be honest. That seems like it shouldn't be the task of someone on their first day. I was a passerby during a public argument between 2 strangers. I passed by before the police rolled in. What I witnessed was a foreigner trying to fight with a Greek vendor. They started throwing each other around. People stepped in to separate them, but they wouldn't let each other go. One guy loses his pants and undies. The other guy is trying to swing at his downstairs area. A young girl rushes in with a chair and breaks it against the head of one of the randoms who tried to separate them. An older grandma throws her shoes at the girl. The guy who got hit by a chair throws the shoes back at the grandma who gets hit square in the face. The younger girl takes her shoe off and smacks his head again, while the grandma runs over, pulling the girl's hair. The guy finally gets a grip on the other guy's Johnson, while one other guy who's separating them is biting on his head, trying to get him to let go. All the while, a woman is screaming from the balcony above them, "You thief, stealing balls from children! Thief, I saw you! Give the balls back to the children!" Yeah, I don't know either, man. So, a couple of years ago, I was in a fender bender. I was driving down from our small town main road late at night on the way home. Small town, so to keep noise down at night, all the traffic lights along the main road are set to green as default and red to the sides, so that big trucks don't have to stop and use their noisy brakes. I'm tired after a long drive, so I'm cruising at speed limit, green lights all the way for me, when out of nowhere, suddenly a car comes screaming into the intersection ahead of me, leaving me with no time to even react. I T-bone them at an angle as they're entering the main road at quite a speed and ricochet off. My car spins around twice on the slightly damp road before coming to a stop without hitting anything else. The other car doesn't even slow down and keeps driving on, leaving me sitting there feeling like I'm that random innocent car that always gets wrecked in a movie when the villain makes his escape. Skip ahead until the authorities arrive. Cop gets out of his car, sees only my car that's almost wrecked and absolutely no damage to anything anywhere else. He looks me up and down, sees blood rushing down my face from a head gash from destroying my rearview mirror and goes, "What the frick happened? What the heck did you hit?" Some questioning later, while the medics are putting a bandage around my head, the other car arrives with only minor damage. The cop must have seen the relief on my face as the other driver walked over and explained that his wife was going into labor, and he had to get her to the hospital. While we were busy at the scene, she gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby girl with no complications. He then left quickly to come and explain, and he even showed us pictures of his newborn on his phone. I didn't press charges and his insurance paid for fixing my car and my medical bills. The what the frick on that cop's face was epic though. I'm not a cop, but a friend who is told me about a call from an apartment building where the tenants were complaining about a smell coming from one of the apartments. When they went in, they found the bathtub full of fecal matter. Turns out the occupant had a scat thing. His parents had money and had to hire a crime scene cleanup crew from 100 miles away to come clean it up. He had never before that day heard of a scat thing. Come to think of it, I don't think I had either. What? Holy crap! Moment got hidden from passengers on a cruise ship. A water pipe burst in a storeroom and soaked all of the spare toilet paper. This was on day 2 of a 14-day voyage to Antarctica. The cabin stewards had to swap around rolls of paper between low-use and high-use guest cabins, and it came right down to the wire. None of the guests found out or realized. Now toilet paper is hidden in every cabin instead of a centralized location. Ship just arrived in Whittier, Alaska, the port for Anchorage, and an elderly passenger dropped dead while walking down the gangway. A conflict ensued between the port security and the ship's medical team. The port security didn't want the ship's medical team to get involved because it technically happened off the ship and the local authorities had jurisdiction. There really was no saving the guy, but the ship's medical team at least wanted to try. But the local authorities wouldn't even allow the chief medical officer to start CPR. The coroner had about a 6-hour ETA, so the port authorities bagged up the body and stuffed it in an X-ray machine storage container in port, guarded by local police, until the coroner could arrive to take the body to Anchorage. The wife of the deceased continued on to finish the vacation for the 7-day rail trip to Denali. It was a 14-day gimmick, 7 days at sea, 7 days scenic rail. My understanding was the cruise line comped her entire vacation, arranged for the remains to be returned home at no cost to her, and provided a personal escort and assistant for the remainder of her vacation. My oh crap moment was when I was hired for a ship on a 2-day notice as a trombone player. When I got on the ship, I found out I was replacing the guy who'd just passed away in a jet skiing accident in Nicaragua. Everyone in the crew knew it, and the last cruise's passengers knew it, and the entire band that I was joining was obviously traumatized. In the end, it became one of my favorite contracts, but the first few weeks were very difficult for everyone. Rest in peace, Bone Guy. I never knew you, but I know they all loved you. One time I was on a cruise and a few cabins down, a man and a woman who were cheating on their wife and husband, respectively, got super drunk and fell over the edge of their balcony, from really high up. It was at night too. The whole cruise ship stopped once it was reported, and it took an entire day to search for them. Apparently the man had his jeans or something because he'd inflated them somehow, and they were holding onto them. They reported that they were stung by multiple jellyfish and were super cold the whole time. That must have been the scariest, most terrible 18 hours of their lives. Wait, they inflated his jeans? What on actual planet Earth happened here? Wet fabric is porous and will generally drag you down. Did they have another inflatable partner that they put inside the jeans? That's the only explanation I can come up with. What sorcery went on here? Are you sure it wasn't leather pants? Because at least that's more feasible. Although still highly improbable. Okay, wild speculation over. I used to be a crew member, and one time a guy working at the front desk jumped overboard after a crew party. He was found a few hours later by the Coast Guard, and everyone was asked to be discreet in order to keep the cruise running smoothly. And everything was fine until the captain came on the PA and said we were delayed because a crew member jumped overboard. Then the madness began. Rumors appeared out of nowhere, and the rest of the cruise was pretty much guests asking what happened the whole time. A lot of crap happens on board. I could write a book, maybe even more than one book. Another time, a guy decided to self-delete in his cabin and his family was on board, including a little girl. But this time it didn't leak to the guests. I saw the family as they were being escorted to the security office. I felt so bad for them. A friend of mine got fired for taking substances, then getting drunk, and then starting to go wee-wee all over his cabin while the security guys were there to take care of him. He spent the night in the little jail on board before being dumped the next day in whatever port we were in. Also, every time we had ice cream at the crew restaurant, people would say it was because they had to empty the freezer to put a dead body in. I provide software and services for most of the major cruise lines and spent a lot of time cruising. On the new builds, it's when you see a lot of the crazy stuff happening. When a new ship is built, they have to go through what's called sea trials. This is a full systems check for multiple reasons. the biggest ones being safety, emissions, and engine and navigation testing. This happens without passengers, and a lot of stuff breaks usually. They'll list the ship, which means leaning it all the way to one side, and then hold position while doing a circle or figure of 8 pattern in the water. I had a 600-pound wine cooler, fully stocked, fall face down about 12 inches away from me while installing a PC at the bar. It sounded like a stick of dynamite exploding from the pressure of all the bottles hitting and simultaneously breaking. I froze, staring at that, and started to come out of the initial shock, and then 4 security members came running around the corner, no one else around except me and about 10 grand in broken wine. The cooler wasn't cheap either. I just stuck my hands in the air and slowly exited the scene. I'm pretty sure if I was standing 1 foot to the right, it wouldn't have been pretty for me. I found out the yard workers forgot to bolt it down, as per protocol. Whoops. Another story that comes to mind with passengers, travel agents, and the family was the first sailing out of the yard. A ship can hold about 4,500 passengers. She's a big girl and has 5 or 6 massive engines to power her. About 3 hours into the sail away, I heard a loud thump and massive vibrations all around. I was in an empty restaurant and saw plates and cups crashing to the ground from the vibrations. My first thought is always to see how the crew reacts. If they're calm, you can stay calm. If they freak out, you'd better start moving. I could see some concern, but they continued on with their business, so I followed their lead and continued doing my work too. About 3 or 4 hours after that, another loud thump and even more vibrations. Then silence. After speaking with a few crew members, I found out we'd lost 2 crew members in the initial incident, and now we just lost the rest. Whatever the reason was, we lost complete propulsion, and this beast of a ship was going to go wherever the ocean wanted it to. Passengers were notified that we would be running late, but to continue having fun and drinks were on the house. No other info was given, which was smart to avoid panic. About 12 hours later, a helicopter was on scene, in the early hours of the morning, dropping us down crates of engine parts, and a short time after that, we had propulsion again. The customers had no idea why we were delayed and didn't seem to care. Somebody shot at the navigation bridge of the ship from the shore on my last ship. The bullet bounced off and hit my colleague on the hand. No real damage, but it scares the heck out of her. She ended up going home for a few weeks. While we waited for the local police to come and investigate and take statements, guests were told we were delaying the departure to take on fresh water. I'm still shocked that that story never got leaked. Writing in 2018, all of the computer systems run on Windows 7, including all of the automation in the machinery space, security systems, fire detection systems, among other things. When Windows updates, it will restart the computers as it does with a normal desktop. Unfortunately, it can also take out every computer at the same time, and we're flying blind until it finishes. People may be more worried to hear that there's a hole in the hull, yet they're actually fairly common occurrences in older ships and easily plugged. Fires happen occasionally. The most terrifying was a crankcase explosion. The fire suppression systems are good at extinguishing them quickly enough though, so they're not even a concern to the crew, unless Windows is updating at the time. There are small fires in places like the kitchens that happen somewhat regularly. Most of the time they're controlled quickly and no one even knows what happened. One of the ships I worked on, a guest jumped off an open deck while we were at sea. He survived though. I think he was super drunk more than he wanted to end things. Norovirus outbreaks happen regularly. That's a literal oh crap moment for a lot of those people. And others just drop dead all the time, especially on some of the nicer lines that are basically floating retirement homes. Ironically, it's when there's a survivable medical emergency that guests become aware of it, when they need to do an emergency evacuation either by tender boat or helicopter. Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't heard more about older folks carking it, to be honest. I just assumed that this was an ongoing thing in the top-heavy age environments on these ships. Suspicion confirmed. I worked on a ship almost 15 years ago. Many stories. This one happened to a friend of mine. A family came on, they had a teenage son who was just not interested in the cruise. As soon as the family got to their room, he jumped off his balcony, which is insanely dangerous. They fished him out, and the family got kicked off the ship. Another fact, there's a small jail-like area called a brig. On my ship, it was on the crew floor, and it had a one-way mirror. Usually it was used for drunk or disruptive passengers. We once had an entertainer find out his ex was coming on the ship. That made him a little stabby, so they put him in the brig until the next port. Our ship officers got a call from a ship of a completely different cruise line off the coast of Cozumel, Mexico. They found one of our passengers floating in the ocean. He wasn't even near the shore at all, just floating in open water. He was alive and perfectly fine. They reviewed the security footage, and in the middle of the night, this guy was just drunk on deck 5 and could be seen holding his phone, dancing to music by himself. He then climbed into one of the lifeboats and did a running jump into the ocean. He left his phone on top of the lifeboat. His body was so fluid from being drunk that he wasn't injured when he hit the water. The cruise ship spotted him and rescued him. His family didn't know he was missing because he'd booked a separate room. This guy told the news that a rogue wave pushed him over the side of the ship. He was on deck 5, so that wave would have had to have been over 40 feet tall. I don't know what happened after that. The entire crew was talking about it for weeks before it hit the news, though. I was playing a production show on guitar and was standing on stage with a wireless unit alone to play Purple Rain, and then all of a sudden the house lights came on and the curtains closed. Everyone in the audience looked at me and I ran off the stage. Turns out a sewage pipe burst backstage and there was crap everywhere. The show was cancelled and the passengers didn't find out why. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Well, all the passengers did find out, but on a QM2 transatlantic crossing, one of the kitchen staff got drunk one night and hurled himself overboard in the North Atlantic. The ship basically found out the next morning when the first mate kept calling on the ship-wide intercom for him to go to his post. That afternoon, the captain announced what had happened and that the ship was turning around with the help of 3 nearby merchant ships to try and search for him. Of course, it was foggy as heck and you couldn't see 100 yards, but just about everyone was on the railings with binoculars trying to search for this poor guy. A wedding even stopped on board. The whole party was out looking once the announcement came that we were in the search area. After, shockingly, nothing was found, the concierge desk set up a multinational currency donation box to send to his family back in Chile. There were 4 days left in the trip at that point, and every day that box was stuffed to capacity. I hope it helped them. This happened in Sweden a few years back. I was a cruise ship worker for a few years, and on a route between 2 cities, there was a really bad storm. So a few minutes after the passengers got off, the storm got so rough that the ship was rocked off the docks and drifted out to sea. Because it takes quite a while to start up the engines, it took some time until we got back to the harbor. Not really dangerous, but if it happened while the passengers were disembarking, it could have gone really badly. Well, for this incident, I was the one passenger who did find out. I was on the Costa Serena in January 2012, just cruising around the Mediterranean. Woke up one morning and all of the crew and waitstaff at breakfast were stone-cold, depressed looking. They made us do an extra lifeboat drill that morning, to all of our confusion. I found out later that day that our sister ship, the Concordia, sank overnight, but didn't have many other details. My now-wife wasn't on the trip and didn't know the exact name of the ship I was on, and found out before us. She was terrified till the next morning when I could get on the ship's internet-connected computer. We also found out the crew was especially depressed because a lot of them had family on the other ship and very little information. It took a few days, but things got back to fairly normal. I just remembered doing lifeboat drills and thinking they were a waste of time. I learned my lesson for sure. I have plenty of oh crap moments, but I'll give you the biggest oh crap moment of all. So we were stuck in the locks of Amsterdam for over 4 hours and no indication of what was going on. After a few hours had passed, the captain came on the PA system, and the reason we didn't leave was because there was a live mine from World War II clattering against the front of the ship. You know, as far as reasons to delay your voyage go, explosive devices threatening hull integrity is a pretty valid one. No notes. I work on cargo ships, but I've trained with cruise ship workers, so I've heard a few of their stories. Generally, the news only picks up on accidents on ships if it's a major accident involving a lot of people. So pretty much only cruise ships, and luckily besides the Costa Concordia, it's pretty rare these days. I do know that they have codes when speaking about incidents though, so as to not alarm passengers. For example, if someone is hurt or dead, which is quite common, if you have a heart attack at sea, then your chances suck, sorry to say. If it happens, they need to call for help via tannoy, and they'll use a code so the passengers don't know what they're talking about. Also, as someone else mentioned, certain cruise companies that attract older passengers have a separate fridge for bodies because getting through a trip without a death isn't very common. Fires. I worked on a cruise ship for 2.5 years and we had 3 major fires. They were all in crew areas and were controlled and extinguished by our awesome fire team. The passengers never knew what happened, only that their waiter had to leave in the middle of a dinner service. People don't realize how much training the crew members go through to handle these situations, and they'll never know that their waiter just helped save the whole gosh darn ship. Someone died. My dad had been working on cruise ships for 30 years, and on one specific cruise we were on in 2008, a man who used to be a sailor all of his life decided he wanted to end it on the seas. He stopped taking his meds, had a small heart attack in the cafeteria, but was okay. Then that night he spent the whole night dancing with his family who had bought on the cruise, and he died the next morning. He had to be kept in the freezers until the next stop in Greece, where his family got off and went back to Hungary. All the other passengers were informed that he'd just gone home due to his health issue, because that had been a very public thing, but it was in fact for his funeral. They still come back to the ship every year. Also, they once lost the anchor. I currently work for a cruise line on shore. I've assisted people who want to bury their loved ones at sea. Obviously, the bodies have to have been cremated and the ashes have to be in a biodegradable container. My buddy worked in the theater on a cruise ship and always had fun stories from traveling around. The cool thing is, beers are less than $1 in the crew bar. The bad thing, you always have to be sober enough to operate a lifeboat and man your station during an emergency. Crew members getting left in countries because they were off getting drunk and chasing cute locals. Old people dying and being put in a freezer on a low deck near one of the storage areas. Good times. A pipe burst and flooded the kitchens. It was a waste pipe, so we had to throw everything out and get a sanitation company to come meet us at our next port and go out and buy all new inventory. We gave out vouchers for food, but if we had been further from port, that would have been awful. A new guy miscalculated the pool treatment and one of the jacuzzis ended up with a pH less than 2. It was discovered before the area opened, and that one remained netted for the rest of the day while it was balanced. A wiper/painter stood on a small cupronickel blackwater pipe to reach higher on the bulkhead. Literal oh crap moment from the floor to his knees. And if you're pushing 140 revs on the shaft and the ship still won't break 15 knots, check the bulbous bow for whales who've been impaled. I am a cruise ship worker. First one is, we don't want you to know that we actually have more fun than the guests are having. Sure, we'll work the big white hot party that you're all going to, but once we finish our shift, all hell is breaking loose in the crew bar. Just below and to the sides of where you're sleeping, there are crew members doing the deed, smoking and drinking. Our beers are $1. No hard substances or spirits, though. We also don't want you to know that all those funny jokes we tell you at bingo? Yeah, same ones are said every single cruise. That really funny answer you gave us about your wife during the happy couples game? Heard it. It was said last cruise, and the one before that, and the one before that. We're not allowed to bang passengers, but we do know all the nooks and crannies the cameras don't reach if we want to. There are morgues below deck and a jail cell, the brig. We get at least 3 deaths on board a month. Some people just go on a cruise to end things. And no, I don't know where Jack or Rose is. They're not real people. Can confirm everything here so far. Dead people, missing persons, self-deletions, crew and passengers, busted substance muling, wild crew parties, 60-cent beers and $1 smokes, so much white snow, group whoopee, among other things. Breaking the crew and personnel mingling rules all the time. Fires, man overboards, medical emergencies, helipad evacuations, using codes like Oscar Oscar equaling man overboard, Bravo Bravo equaling fire, star code equaling medical emergency, equipment failing all the time where you drift for an extra day or two, which is sometimes blamed on ports or weather, other times they're honest, storms and rough seas, bath bags everywhere bouncing off the walls, boat drills, crews and passengers twice per week, which is hell. Well, thank you for accurately summing up the majority of our stories here. Gotta say, I expected the mass fatalities, I did not foresee all the wild staff parties or ships just drifting openly on the high seas. The more you know. I went on a cruise once. There was an infestation of lice and I got off at the first port and flew home. Carnival fully reimbursed me. A passenger went missing and nobody could find him for a couple of days. Turns out he'd decided he didn't want to live on this planet anymore, in the fan room, so everyone had been sucking dead guy air for a while. We definitely kept that one under wraps. But yeah, that's the only one that the crew kept secret. I do have some other crazy and funny stories about working on ships though. I was a musician, and one time a guest entertainer, like a fly-on act who joins the ship for a cruise to perform one show, thought he was frickin' Freddie Mercury and threw out his Digipack CDs like ninja stars into a completely dark house. It ended up clocking some old woman a half-inch below the eye, and she had to go to medical. The husband wrote the cruise director a very threatening letter, basically saying, "My wife almost went blind, so I strongly suggest you give us a free steak dinner. I'd usually be hungover, so I'd drink during the day to get over it. I'd go out in port and get smashed and come back. On turnaround days, the days where a new group of passengers arrive, we had to take attendance and do a life jacket demonstration. I was so hammered one time, I threw up in the stairwell as passengers were coming in. I somehow didn't get fired or even reprimanded, even though everything I chucked up was straight liquid and smelled caustically like alcohol. We all have small cabins in close proximity to each other. We usually keep a spare key under our nameplates in case we lock ourselves out by accident. One night I woke up to a fellow musician who didn't have a shirt on, peeing into my wastebasket in the corner. He was so drunk he thought my cabin was his, and he got the key from behind the nameplate and just decided to do it into the closest hole. I'm working on a cruise ship currently. One time we had to turn around to take someone to a hospital, and then there was a fire in the laundry room. It was also a pretty rocky sea. Also, people die all the time on cruise ships and the bodies are kept in a special freezer. I mean, you've got to do something with the body if you're at sea, right? I went on one of those overnight cruises to Bruges, and we caught one of the sea men with his pants literally around his ankles as he was submerged deep in one of the waitresses. We skedoodled the heckaroo out of there and later found out it was actually a couple who were on the cruise as passengers and were role-playing, and that we'd actually barged into their cabin by accident while drinking. When did an insane complaint about an employee turn out to be true? Well, one of our workers went number 2 in the toilet of a vacant apartment that didn't have running water, and then just didn't say anything about it and left. They know that they're supposed to use bathrooms in the offices and clubhouses because vacant units never have running water. The complex didn't find it until 3 days later when they bought a potential tenant for a walkthrough. It had been over 100 degrees all week. The woman I spoke to said there wasn't any toilet paper either. The cemetery director was selling plots, pocketing the money, $750, and then selling the same plots to another family. The second family would show up ready to bury their deceased, only to find the grave already being used. He got away with that for over a year. I worked at a cemetery, and apparently a woman before my time was crooked as all heck. The big thing that got her fired was when a child died and the family started paying on a marker. Now, those things are expensive, and they got a nice marker, so it took a while to pay it off. Various family members would come in and make payments from $50 to $2,000 for the parents, and this witch took the money, wrote a fake contract, said the money was a down payment, and then merrily took the commission. It was found out when not only did people not pay on those false contracts, shocker, but the parents came in asking how much was left to pay after, and so put down a couple of grand. They had to wait about a year to get their little girl's marker put down. Had a complaint that someone was driving one of our machines with a giant swastika on the side. Never in a million years would have believed it. Went down and there it was. Person was fired immediately, but he didn't care. Had an employee that was actively robbing local banks on his days off. I believe he'd hit 8 or 9 different banks before he got caught. Found out about it during an early AM FBI raid of the employee locker and break rooms, done in conjunction with a raid on his house. To say it was a shock was an understatement. He wasn't even top 20 of my list of potential felonious employees. A chain restaurant here does student discounts of 30% off. One of the waiters, who was a student himself, would use his own student discount whenever a table paid full price in cash and keep the difference for himself. Only got found out because head office emailed the manager to check why one student had eaten at the restaurant 5 times a day for the last few weeks. This is one of those ones where they probably could have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for their own greed. Seriously, kid, just do that with 1 or 2 of your biggest tables a week. Although I guess eventually they might wonder why a student waiter was shouting multiple table groups of 8 for entrees, main, and drinks. Many years ago, the bookshop I worked at hired a new employee with terminal cancer. Very sad since she was quite young. She wasn't around too much due to the chemotherapy and her other treatments, but when she was, she worked in the children's department. She was actually a pretty good children's bookseller and was a huge fan of a fairly major American children's author. She ran the UK branch of his fan club and knew him personally. He occasionally flew her out to the States for events. One day she wasn't in and all of the employees were called to a staff meeting. We were informed that she had passed away. There was a lot of sadness. Her close colleagues were devastated. Only a few days later, one of the staff happened to go into a branch of McDonald's in a nearby town. Guess who was working behind the counter? Go on, guess. Turns out she was never ill. She made the whole thing up, as well as faking her own death, for reasons that we never really fully understood. The general consensus was that it started out as a way to connect with her author hero, and just kinda spiraled from there. In the end, she couldn't handle living the lie anymore, so just up and had her mother tell people that she'd died. And then got a job in Mackie D's a few miles down the road and was surprised when she got found out. That was a pretty what the frick sort of experience for us all. I was reviewing employee evaluations at a Fortune 500, and one of them complimented an employee for improving as he hadn't yet eaten any paste this quarter. So I go to the manager and ask if there's a way she can cut the insult. She said, "It's not an insult. I caught him eating paste twice last year. Wrote him up for it too. He's the reason the folks in the documents had to switch to mucilage and rubber cement." And there was another one. I found a comment card in our suggestion box to improve your seafood selection. Your trout made me sick. We were a hardware store. The boss mentioned it at the next store meeting, laughing and taking bets on which customer left it and which store she had mistaken us for. Marco, one of the assistant managers, got a really sour face. The boss said, "What's the matter, Marco? Trout got your tongue?" No, but that might have been me. I told a couple of customers about all the fish I caught on my vacation, and one of them asked if I'd caught any trout. So, he had been selling them trout from our hardware store. One of my current co-workers told me this story the other day. He used to be a manager at a fast food restaurant. He said that one night, after a busy rush, a woman called his store to complain that her fried food item had hair all over it. The manager denied this claim and assured the lady that the food had never been in contact with hair and would never have left the store in a dirty manner. He backed his store and employees all the way and insisted that this woman was mistaken. Upon further investigation, one of the kitchen employees admitted that she had dropped a food item on the floor that night and didn't want to risk having the customer wait an extra 5 minutes to make a new one. We had a new hire. Kind of weird, definitely suffering from a lack of social skills. Fast forward a few days later, and a customer comes back to return a piece of merchandise, claiming when they got home there was blood on it. We looked, and yep, that was blood. We looked up the transaction. Only about 45 minutes earlier. The new hire had set it up. Went to find him, but he wasn't in his department, which isn't necessarily a big deal. We had to go back into the warehouse for stuff all the time. Went to find him. There he was, in the warehouse, using razor blades in ways that they definitely aren't meant to be used, bleeding all over the place. Just fired an intern because he thought it'd be funny to hit one of the girls on the butt. Upon further investigations, she had been having anxiety coming to work because he had asked all sorts of ridiculously inappropriate questions. For example, he asked her if she had had a good weekend. She told him it was a good weekend or some plain answer, and he then asked her if it was because she had been railed by her boyfriend a lot. Oof. Needless to say, her anxiety was warranted and we fired him as soon as we could. The mood in the group seems a bit more relaxed afterwards. I knew a guy who worked at a Subway back when they gave out stamps. Basically, for every 6 inches of sub you bought, you earned a stamp, and once you filled a card with 8 stamps, you could get a free 6-inch sub. So this one guy started only giving stamps to customers who asked for them. If they didn't ask, he pocketed their stamps and grew a sizable stack of complete stamp cards. Then, over time, he started cashing them in. When a customer paid with cash, he'd ring it in as a freebie, place his own completed stamp card in the till, and pocket the cash. Customer got their sub, Subway's till was balanced, and he had an extra $5 or $10 to his pocket. Everyone was happy. He worked there for a few years, and word was he racked up a few $1,000s running this scheme. No idea if anyone complained or if he was ever caught, but he did buy a motorbike. Haha, excellent. I mean, I could complain that these customers didn't get their free subs, but honestly, I love the idea of someone profiting that much from the world's scummiest sandwich chain. He was only as callous and morally bankrupt as they act to their employees and partners on a daily basis. This video is not sponsored by Subway. we found out that our guy was stalking a female employee. It was a 24-hour retailer, and she was a morning shift, and he was a night shift, so I thought there was no way they knew each other. Then one day I was filling in for a different manager, and he came into the break room and was taking pictures of the morning shift schedule. I asked him why, and he told me some story about a different employee just wanting him to send their schedule. Alright, so I came in on my day off later that week during another day shift and caught him staring at her from a different aisle while she was stocking. She had no idea. He'd follow her home and watch her house and all that. She was 17, he was 38. I called the cops and had him escorted off the property and helped her get in touch with the right resources for a restraining order. He ended up violating that order multiple times and is in jail last time I heard. I was the head night auditor at an upscale airport property. We had a young night auditor who put a room into out-of-order status and let his friends in to party and have group whoopee that he joined during his lunch break. He got caught because of a noise complaint. Police called, he was fired and blacklisted from being hired back. So I worked retail and we got this guy who we'll call Gus. My boss tells me, hey, this guy's got anxiety, go easy on him, okay? So I was like, okay, that's cool, I get it, I can relate. I do everything I can to help him make sense of the infernal, godforsaken hellscape that is retail. It starts off with little forgivable things, forgetting a task here, forgetting things there, accidentally moving the wrong info and things like that. You know, newbie retail stuff like that. He quickly devolved in popularity as his complacency grew over time and his helpful attitude shrank. My guy started messing around during his shift, getting caught on his phone while ignoring backup cashier calls, things like that. He'd make stabbing motions behind the manager's back to other employees, tell off new employees, and play it all off like he was some innocent dope who didn't know any better. None of this got him fired. Day after day was a new complaint from an employee about responsibilities he shirked or a customer about blatantly wrong info like, oh yeah, we have another location up the hill, when we didn't. No idea whose son he was because that was apparently all kosher. What actually got him fired is the one day he bought a dog and a super expensive dog collar into work. He claimed he almost hit the dog on the way to work and it was running around wild. He tried to sell the dog collar to a customer and then tried to adopt out the dog to a coworker. Luckily, that coworker was competent enough to take the dog to a vet, whereupon they found a microchip and contacted the actual owners. That's where the fun started. It came about that Gus never found the dog at all. He had straight up kidnapped the dog from his neighbor and tried to pawn it off, knowing full well what he was doing. The guy lawyered up immediately, tried to sue Gus, and threatened to sue the store and store manager if Gus wasn't fired. Suffice to say, Gus was gone the very same evening. Nothing else came of it, but we talked about him for years and years and years. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Well, she was going #1 on the chairs in the office. No, she didn't have any sort of health issues, she just didn't feel like going to the bathroom to pee. As far as I know, she still works there. On his second day at KFC, he tried to walk out with 2 buckets of chicken and ran right into our boss. Had a coworker who always had a really strong stench, and I thought it was just bad BO. Turns out she was addicted to mothballs and was licking them during work hours. The chemicals gave off an unbelievably strong smell through their skin. We got complaints about her odor, but didn't take them seriously. I thought people were just being jerks, until someone saw her actively licking on the job. It was the kind of smell where you could never really quite put the finger on what it was, but once we figured it out, it made a lot of sense. It doesn't smell one for one like actual mothballs, but like they've been processed through your body and skin. We were also very wary of being discriminatory, which is why it wasn't discovered earlier. I like to think that we educate on this channel sometimes, and today was the day that the narrator Googled this and learned that this is actually not infrequent and that people do this to get buzzed off of whatever chemical cocktail is in those things. That's insane. Now that we've been educated, don't do this, kids. It's not worth it. I managed a girl who was, let's just say, a loose cannon. She was an alcoholic who had multiple appointments every week. Psych, physio, solicitors, all of it. She was constantly disappearing from work at random hours for like half a day, and as her drinking intensified, she'd show up stinking of booze. I'm a former alcoholic and the same age, so I did try my best with her. Anyway, she was on the long stretch towards getting performance managed, but she sped it up herself. We shared a building with the council and knew all of the staff, including the council rangers who patrol the streets and give tickets. One morning on her way to work, she saw a street sign that she wanted to take and give to a friend. I couldn't tell you why. She pulled a screwdriver from her bag, why she had it, again I can't say, and just unscrewed it while standing on a milk crate in front of one of the rangers. She brought it into the office, told everyone, asked another staff member to hide it for her in case a ranger came looking, and then also put photos of it on Instagram with the office and company signage in the background. We had a meeting planned that day about her absenteeism, and she told me because she thought it was a good laugh. Anyway, it took a few days, but she did quit when HR started investigating. Hired a guy on a trial basis. He was really polite and careful when speaking to me, but several of my female employees told me when I wasn't around he was just creepy. After about 5 days, one of them came to me and said almost verbatim, "I think he's an unspeakable act offender." She just had a gut feeling about him. So I ran a background check on him and yep, he was a convicted unspeakable act offender. This was almost 20 years ago when background checks weren't standard procedure and I wasn't in charge of that regardless. HR would make the decision. In this case, I requested it specifically because the safety of my employees appeared to be at stake, but not one other time in my career did I feel the need to ask for one. I had a pretty weird coworker, which isn't unusual for software engineers, but he'd always have security feeds of a cabin he owned in Tahoe pulled up on one of his monitors. And this monitor would be angled away from the entry to his cubicle, so only he could see it. One day, the employee went out to lunch and the FBI showed up. They asked my boss to call the employee into his office when the employee got back without giving him any clue that something's going on. When this happened, the FBI arrested the guy while simultaneously raiding his house and his Tahoe cabin. Apparently, he was a key part in a trafficking and kidnapping ring of the worst sort. Catching this guy was actually a pretty massive deal and made a bunch of headlines. I could find the news articles if I could remember his full name. I had a number of complaints about a new member of staff. They said that she kept taking her shoes off, pulling dry skin from her feet, and eating it. I thought the staff were lying and being mean about her just because they didn't like her. Until I saw her do it. She did quit about a week after I saw. She didn't really get on with the other staff because they all thought she was a bit gross, and she got into a really bad mood because of it. I'm not entirely blaming her. I said before that I thought the staff might be lying. The reason I say that is because it's a small group of staff and they all collectively decide pretty quickly if they like or dislike someone. If they decide they like you, you're golden. If they decide they don't like you, you're shut out. By all of them. It's quite a brutal environment, psychologically I mean, but she got cold-shouldered pretty quickly and left before the week was out. Once had a coworker selling shrimp from the dumpster. Picked them out after brunches, popped a few on a skewer, and sold them in the bars that night. Got caught in a bar with the manager and the CCTV caught him dumpster diving. They had him arrested. Used to work as a night auditor at a hotel, and one day I was told one of the daytime workers was fired. She was this really sweet old lady who worked part-time, and it was really hard to get fired there, so I was quite curious. Several customers had complained, concerned that there was something very off about this woman. She was slurring and just seemed very off that day. Management was concerned, at first thinking that there was a medical issue. After a few more incidents, they checked the cameras and found out she was taking shots of vodka throughout her shift. Like an absurd number of shots. I can't remember how many, but I remember being rather impressed that she could function at any capacity. Had a new hire, as in less than a week on a job at a movie theater, where I worked as supervisor. They threw a very loud and unbelievably childish tantrum in front of a lobby full of customers because her direct supervisor asked her to sweep up some popcorn that a customer spilled. She kept screaming, "I ain't cleaning up someone else's mess. Make them," by which they meant the customer, "do it." She was 24 years old. The meltdown she had when she got fired for her tantrum was nuclear, with lots of screaming and threats of how her parents were going to call the company and get all your butts fired. The next day, someone claiming to be her dad did call and tell us that we were going to rehire my daughter and apologize to her and fire the supervisor and manager or else. But nothing more came from that. The top manager just laughed and hung up. I've yet to ever see such an epic entitled tantrum before or since. Look, if they were stupid enough to think that this would work, I have to believe that they called in and said something like, "Hello, this is your boss," and then struggled to think of a name when asked for what the name was. What a hilarious idiot. When I worked at Sam's Club, one of the cashiers pocketed a few grand from his drawer and put it on Facebook. We were a new club, so if that much money went missing, it would have taken them a while to figure it out, or so I was told. One of the managers overheard and they put 2 and 2 together. The guy got arrested and was fired. Night shift at a packing line. We had 2 new temps and they were polar opposites. One super bubbly religious guy who was pretty emotional and cried during his favorite songs, and the other guy was grunge, pretty cynical but a damn good worker. Well, they both ended up working on adjacent lines and I was training them. Things were great until the bubbly guy decided it was his mission to befriend the grunge guy. Grunge dude wanted to be left alone so he could work, but bubbly guy kept going on to our team lead to tell her he couldn't understand why grunge wouldn't be his friend. My team lead comes down and tells this guy to play nice and be friends. She had drunk the Kool-Aid that we were a family at this workplace and was despised by most of our crew. She was oblivious. I told her that Bubbles needs to leave grunge alone for the sake of our workplace, but our team lead just wouldn't have it. Grunge walked out, and Bubbles cried for 2 nights straight, then never came back. Local hardware store had an employee tickling his pickle and putting the resulting product in a coworker's coffee. True story. People found out, and he was arrested. Fair enough. I was working for an agency in New York, and we went to a client meeting for starting a new project in Boston. One of the project managers who worked for the same agency in the LA office flew in from LA and joined us for the week-long meetings with the customer. Super nice guy who did his homework and gave really good presentations, and everyone liked him. After wrapping up the week of meetings, I flew back to New York on Friday. Later, there was supposed to be video conferences with the client, but they just sent an email last second saying that they were cancelling all meetings. Well, none of us thought much about it and carried on with the day. In the evening, we got to know from our boss that the same project manager sent his downstairs pic to a female employee who was our client. None of us believed this at first, but it turned out to be completely true. Listen, I've got to know if sending unsolicited downstairs pics ever works out for these guys. That an employee took a woman's phone number from her account at the store we worked at and called her. I didn't think anyone was that stupid. Huge, well-known international company. Young, straight-out-of-college guy just hired, as in first day, the same week, who'd moved from Eastern Europe to a corporate location. Cue the company ski trip. Free booze, some of his new colleagues and friends told him that this woman was checking him out, he wasn't exactly sober and started hitting on her. She told him to knock it off, that she wasn't interested. He got pushy. Big scary dude beside the woman told him to knock it off. He swung at the large scary dude and promptly found himself face first in the snow. The woman in question? The head of global HR. The large scary dude? Head of global corporate security, ex-military. The young schmuck? Fired. How did a cheater get caught by their significant other? I've been cheated on and cheated with, but never cheated myself. Each time the cheater just fessed up and told the truth. Except for my 6th grade boyfriend, Chris. I found out from everyone else in my middle school that he made out with some skank at the movie that he had invited me to when I'd been busy. Screw you, Chris. Totally over it, though. I forgot to go back and mark the episodes as unwatched. I doubt I'll ever get the truth on it, but my ex, we were together for 6 years, engaged for a year and a half, went on a work trip to Vegas. We were 8 months away from our wedding. Half of it was paid for, like the venue, videographer, photographer, flowers, catering. All of these had deposits. The dress was bought and paid for. Then she got back from the trip and said, "I don't love you anymore." Kicked me out of the apartment and had a new guy move in 3 weeks later and got engaged to him a few months ago, about a year and a half after the split. Either she had been cheating for a while or thinking about it, or both. Either way, it was the best thing that ever happened to me while simultaneously being the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I am much better off now and much happier and healthier as well. I'm finally over it, although it took about 2 years. She did hurt me pretty frickin' badly, but I look back and realize that I hated myself. Because I was severely overweight and wasn't in any position to love someone else the way they needed to, because I didn't love myself. Life will crap all over you sometimes, and you either wipe it off and learn from it, or sit and play in it and get used to the stench. And no one wants to be around you. Your choice. Went to the gym. Oops, I forgot my headphones. That's cool because the house is only 5 minutes away. Pull up and see my work buddy's car out front. That's weird. Walk into the house through the open garage. My son was coloring at the kitchen table. I ask him, "Hey bud, where's your mum?" He points up the stairs. Walk to stairs, hear moaning and movement. Up until this point, I'd suspected but never had proof. Knew I had to go look and catch her, or she'd say I was overreacting and tell me it wasn't what I thought. Walk upstairs and I hear them in the spare bedroom. Walk into the room and say, "Well, this is awkward." They both freak out and try to grab clothes and tell me that nothing's going on. I walk to my car and have my ex-buddy chase me out and tell me to hit him. I go to my command, I'm in the military, the next day. I report him and have the command force him to call his wife that day and let her know. I'm now divorced and much happier. What a weird cluster of psychological phenomena here. From trying to deny the affair whilst hip-deep in each other, to your friend trying to make you punch him. Was it guilt, or was he trying to preemptively counter any legal stuff with like a physical assault charge? It's very weird. About 20 years ago, I caught my ex, not screwing, but in bed with another guy, on Valentine's Day, with a dozen roses in my hand. What a frickin' C-word. Fighting would get you kicked out of college, so I told the much smaller guy once I saw him off campus, I'd kill him. 15 years and worlds later, and I'm at an engagement party at a bar, and some friends come up to me and tell me the guy over there is scared shirtless of me and thinks I'm going to kill him. I look over and start laughing and can't stop. It was so far in the past, but for some reason that guy remembered it like I'd sworn an oath to avenge my family. It felt good. His fear was redemption enough. I caught my ex when we were both standing in the examining room getting his UTI treatment. Doctor came in and said gonorrhea. He lied for a whole 2 or 3 months, I imagine. Even lied about how he got it. Tried convincing me that he'd swiped his member in some mystery fluids in a gas station toilet. What the frick? When he realized I wasn't frickin' stupid, he tried to drink random bottles on the doctor's shelf. He started attacking himself. He fell on his knees sobbing and tried grabbing my hands and begging for me not to leave. He threatened to take us both out that entire night and attacked me for close to 9 hours while I was trying to pack my bags and leave, with a final spirited, violent attack in the driveway. I just spoke at his sentencing this Thursday. He's a convicted felon now, and I hope he's grown from all this. I got caught because I was smiling at my cell phone too much. My partner made this assumption. I had to explain that I was just using Reddit. My fiancée left me 2 days before Christmas. She told me she needed to move out and get space, that she was moving to her friend's house. This went on for a week until, because we have a family Apple plan, I looked up her location. She was not at her friend's house. I'm now a single dad of a 1-year-old and she's moving out west with that guy. Merry Christmas, baby Jesus. My dad was recently caught cheating on my mum after 27 years together. While using his laptop, my mum noticed Facebook had said, "Hello, Mike Long, can we log you back in?" My sweet mum still had no idea he'd been cheating until my teenage sister broke it to her that he was using a fake account. That only opened a whole other world of nasty surprises. Love you, Dad, but also, I hate you. A brother of mine caught his wife. Her phone would always be going off and she'd hide it. He got curious, looked into it and found some guy had been texting her for a few months. She said she was going to stay home because she had to catch up on homework over the weekend. My brother and I went on our hunting trip and he told me about this. We never left the city. We went to my house and stayed there till it got dark, then drove back to his neighborhood in my neighbor's car. She sent him a picture of her at home saying she was going to bed early that night. Well, we snuck close to the house after a car parked down the street and a guy walked to the house and let himself in. My brother was fuming at this point and wanted to beat the crap out of the guy. I settled him down and told him to think about the long run. We snuck up to the house and using the night vision camera got videos of them bumping uglies in the living room. My brother wanted to confront this guy at this point, so I did something messed up and called the cops and said I heard a lot of yelling from the house. Could they go check? This kept my brother from attacking the dude, a coworker of hers. The cops show up, take statements, we leave, and the next day he pulls her iMessages off the email account and talks to a lawyer. We give the lawyer the messages, and when we show up 5 days later from our hunting trip, he calls her and says he caught something badass and wants her to come out and see it. When she comes out, he gives her the divorce papers and kicks her out of the house. She had police do a civil standby while she got her stuff a few days later. The house was his before they got married, so all she got to keep was some stuff they bought together and her car. No kids, and the prenup annulled the alimony that she could have gotten as he made way more money than her. The guy she was sleeping with had a record. We saw her a few months later. She tried talking to my wife and said that she missed my brother and she was so sorry. The guy and her broke up all of a couple of weeks after the divorce. It happened to a friend of mine. We were all on a vacation, about 7 friends, and everyone was drinking. We were the only 2 who didn't drink. He managed to snag his girlfriend's phone while she was passed out and pulled me to the side. He said, "She's cheating on me. Some guy named Joey texting her and meeting her after work for doing the deed every day. Just going on and on about how great their bedroom life is." We ended up searching for names and mutual friends via Facebook. Turns out Joey was a girl. While at uni, I walked in on an argument between my girlfriend and her housemate as the housemate shouted, "At least I'm not a working girl who sleeps with everyone when she goes home." Turns out my girlfriend was sleeping around. I'm a live-in nanny, and the parents are going through a particularly nasty divorce, mostly because she's bat-crap insane. But she decided that she didn't give an F anymore and started bringing this guy she's been doing the deed with back to the house, sometimes even while the dad is home. She says, "We're just friends," but I've caught them making out on several occasions. Which she says, of course, that he kissed her and she didn't want it or whatever bullcrap. Really, Amanda? Then why did I watch you go sit down on his lap and stick your tongue down his throat? She's also encouraged the kids, while the dad isn't home, to call this new guy Daddy. Thankfully, the dad has finally realized how frickin' nuts she is and is getting a divorce. As this is all pretty recent, we haven't found a new place yet. Thank God he's going for full custody and that the kids are still really young, and that I'm going with him and the kids and not her. It terrifies me what these kids are going to have to deal with in their lives because she's their mum. She's an incredibly selfish, narcissistic piece of crap excuse for a human being, and I hope that all of this karma comes back to bite her on the butt really frickin' hard. I caught my boyfriend of 2 years. He'd asked me to proofread his paper on his Mac, and the text messenger popped up on the right-hand side of the screen. He was sitting in his bed texting some girl, "Good night, I love you," while sitting right next to me in his bed. I deleted his entire paper, wrote, "Who's Marissa?" saved it and told him it looks great and left. She was his girlfriend of 8 years who'd lived next to his parents 2 hours away. This is a cold and totally baller move from you, author. What's he going to complain about? Oh, you're going to miss the deadline for your essay? Well, I've missed the last 2 years of my life, Derek, so get some frickin' perspective and deal with it. Oh my god, this sounds just like what happened to my friend. She was dating him for 2 years and he had a girlfriend near his parents' house for 10 years. Apparently he had talked about marriage with both of them. Like how? What was your plan if you didn't get caught? My ex, many moons ago, was a frickin' idiot. She knew that I had many friends that lived in the same neighborhood as her ex that she had left a couple of months before dating me. She always told me that she was going over to a girlfriend's house to study, and I had no reason not to believe her, until one day she wouldn't answer a single text. Now, I'm not the kind of guy to text a billion times. I'll text you, then if you don't reply, maybe I'll text you 2 or 3 hours later to make sure you got my last message. And if you still don't answer, then I'll talk to you when you feel like you want to talk. So anyway, I'm at my friend's house later that night, having not gotten a reply from her since about 12 hours ago. Me and the group of friends decide to go outside in his backyard to make a fire pit when I notice her car in the driveway of the house behind us. I didn't know that was her ex's house, but it was the way wrong neighborhood for her girlfriend's house. I call her sister up and say, "Where's your sister?" And she says, "Oh, well, she's at the girl's name's house." Well, I'm going fricking nuts then because I'm looking at her car right now and this isn't the girl's name's neighborhood. Her response to that was, So I hung up and asked my friend who lives in the house we were all hanging out at, who owns the house behind him. Oh, that's her ex's house. I called her phone to find out it was off. So I just chilled the rest of my time there and paid it no more attention. No sense in worrying at this point, as it's a done deal. About 2 hours later, I get a call from her saying the phone was on silent for study purposes and if I wanted to come over. Sure, I told her. I arrive at the house a little bit after and she hops in the car, and as soon as she shuts the door, I ask, "How was studying with your girlfriend's name?" And she gives me some bullcrap answers like I didn't know. After she's done spewing her lies, I say, "Weird, must have been a long walk from your ex's house." I made sure to look at her face as I said it so that I could see any expression. She knew that I knew but wouldn't let it go. It'll go quicker if I just give you the rundown of the dialogue that happened. We were just talking things out. Why would it be okay to just go over there and do that if you have a boyfriend? Talk things out? What needs to be talked out? We've been friends for a really long time before dating. I just can't stop talking to him. So to get around that, you feel it's logical to lie to me about going to your girlfriend's house. It's 11 p.m. You've been talking it out since 10 a.m. I've tried getting a hold of you a couple of times too. Silence for a bit then. So what did you guys do? She wouldn't answer or look at me. I told her to get out of the car and just pulled off. She had broken up with him the first time because he was a complete jerk to her and seemed to not really want to do anything with himself. About a year after I drove off, she called me asking if we could try and make it work again and if I'd like to get together over dinner. So I said yes and arranged a date at a fairly upscale place for Saturday at 8 p.m. I told her the dress code and all, since it was a snazzy joint. I'm not sure how long she sat there because I didn't frickin' go. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. I signed into her Google account to check her emails. She had forgotten her password, so I was resetting it. I checked her Google Maps history, and her most recent visits were at my best friend's house while I was away for work. Huzzah for Google Maps! I was on a break from my girlfriend at the time, got a text from a girl that I had mutual friends with and knew each other kind of well. Started having a dirty conversation, talking about sleeping together and stuff. Turns out my girlfriend at the time had gotten a burner phone with a different number and was the one sending me the text the whole time. She wasn't pleased. That awkward moment when you're both dating for 7 months and then you just both kind of find each other on Tinder close to your 8-month mark. It was pretty hilarious because we were both like, that sort of checks out. You want to see other people? So we both broke up but stayed friends and kept our friend group together even till today. In short, found each other on Tinder close to our 8-month mark and decided to just be friends. My wife. We started getting distant from each other and we'd planned a trip to see my grandparents who live a few states away. A month before the planned trip, she told me that she wanted to cancel it and go to a family reunion on her side of the family in a completely different state, and that she wanted to go alone and not bring our kids. I thought that was weird because why wouldn't you want to introduce your kids to the family they never see? Like I said, we were growing distant, so I just said, okay, fine, go. Maybe the time apart will be good for us. She came back and suddenly wanted to move across the country to go work at a hospital job that her distant aunt had offered me. Didn't even ask me if I was willing to go. I told her, you do whatever it is you need to be you, but you're not taking the kids. After a few days, she realized that she couldn't leave and not see the kids, so she begged me to forgive her. I did. And then over the next month we became more distant than we were before all this had happened. I took lunch at work and decided to go home for it, which I never do, and when I got home there was no one there, so I decided to go through her computer, which I also never do. Found pictures of her with some guy she'd met on Zynga Poker who lived, guess where? The state that her supposed family reunion was. I've never had a panic attack until that day. I had to call my neighbor and have him sit with me because I legit thought I was having a heart attack. Took pictures of everything I found, other pictures, emails, and Facebook messages. I waited until the kids were in bed, because I refused to fight and scream in front of them, and laid all of my pictures out there for her to see. Not a fun day. I advertised myself on Craigslist Casual Encounters, and her brother-in-law found me on there. It wasn't until some time later I questioned what he was doing there also. As someone whose girlfriend is spending a month in Europe, I should not have started reading these other replies. Oh, pal, hang in there, buddy. A month isn't that long, and most people aren't that crappy to their spouses, even when they have jobs where they spend a lot longer abroad. If you didn't feel worried until you read this, then that's probably a good level of trust. My ex-girlfriend cheated on me while I was in basic training. I was allowed to call on my birthday. Being madly in love, I used it to call my girlfriend, who was pregnant with our daughter. I remember the conversation as if it were yesterday. She says, "Hello? Hey babe, I miss you. How are you doing?" Okay. I have someone who wants to talk to you." Another voice comes on. "Hey man, don't worry about her. I'm taking good care of her." Okay. May I talk to her?" "Sure, here she is." What? This is bullcrap. And I slammed down the receiver for the payphone. Apparently, I echoed. I received a letter from her that day with her telling me that she had lost the baby, which later I found out to also be a lie, but that's a whole other kettle of fish. I got caught because I forgot I gave her an extra key. Not me, but my buddy. He's such a great guy and yet has been cheated on by every girl he's ever dated. First girl apparently gets so blackout drunk that she can't tell who is who because after going to the party one night, ended up telling my friend that they should have bathtub whoopee like they did the other night. Only he had never done the deed in a bathtub. The second girl dumps him because she was convinced he was cheating on her. After swearing up and down that he wasn't, he finally asked why she was so convinced. He's a great guy and would never even give the slightest reason for her to be suspicious. She told him that she had been cheating, so he had to have been as well. And the third girl that he's currently with is best friends with her most recent ex, as in still goes on best friend dates. She still lives with and is friends with her ex-boyfriend. It's apparent to everyone but him that he's being cheated on. He's really just so sweet and naive. I caught my ex thanks to Pokemon frickin' Go of all things. She mentioned Pokemon was using lots of her data. I explained that in her settings she could see how much data an app was using. I proceeded to show her and then proved to her it wasn't Pokemon Go by pointing out Tinder was using way more data. It was sad, but also funny the way that went down. I knew my wife was up to some shady stuff, went through her texts, which I sent to a lawyer. The one text that cut the deepest? Baby Cakes Marco asking if he could splooge on her engagement and wedding rings. Frick you, Amanda. My first girlfriend cheated on me. She left to go to a party, but I couldn't go, so I kissed her and said, "Have fun, be safe." She later called me and said she slept with 2 different guys and that it was fun, so she was dumping me. I'm still recovering from that one. My heart busted harder than those dudes on my ex's face. Back in the day, Snapchat used to tell you the top 3 friends of any of your friends. I saw that I was number 1, her best friend was number 3, and some dude coworker was number 2. I later logged into her Voxer account and was able to hear conversations between her and said dude, where she'd say things like she can't wait to run her hands through his hair, and then the pinnacle was when he asked her if his splooge tasted different after drinking Pineapple Monster energy drinks. She said she doesn't usually taste it and just swallows, and that she'll have to pay more attention next time. I confronted her, and she's telling me that I'm taking it out of context. Yeah, because that's a normal conversation between male and female coworkers. Oh my god, what a d-bag. Did that moron actually think Pineapple Monster had any real pineapple in it? I'm beginning to wonder if people are watching this and looking for advice on how to avoid getting caught cheating. My iPhone synced to her roommate's laptop, revealing a treasure trove of undressed pictures I had saved in my camera roll. Years later, iPhones now ask you if you want to trust a computer that you're charging from, rather than just syncing automatically. Came a bit too late for me. A buddy of mine was cheating on his then-wife with a cam girl. They were a very religious church-going couple in their 20s. The cam girl blackmailed him for $500 saying that otherwise she'd send it to his entire friends list. Wife, parents, grandma, pastor. He paid her off. When she asked for $500 more, he confessed. She still sent the videos. It was pretty crazy for a while. The wife was considering a divorce until she got pregnant. They worked things out and things are all good now. The guy really turned around and became a much better person. I got caught when I admitted it. Being a cheater is one thing, but it turns you into a liar too, and by the end of it you've completely lost your soul. I didn't want to do that, so I just admitted things. I came back into town a day early and went to surprise him at work. Found him doing the deed with another secretary. He was also a secretary. He didn't see me, so I took a quick photo and snuck back out. Went home, called my friends and family. They came over and helped me pack up all his crap and change the locks. Dumped his stuff at his mum's house. I sent him the picture of him and the chick and informed him that he and his belongings now reside with his mother again. The house was mine and all the documents were in my name. He received no mail to my place. He also lived paycheck to paycheck, so no idea what he spent his money on as I paid all the bills. He spent the next few weeks begging me to take him back and all that jazz, bothered my friends, showed up at my job caterwauling on the street in front of the house. He eventually got bored and stopped. No idea what happened to him after that, but I haven't seen or heard from him since. What survival myth is complete baloney and could get you killed? If you ever fall off a ship or ferry at sea and are lucky enough to be spotted, don't try to swim your way to safety. The more you swim, the less your chances of survival. Just try to keep afloat and conserve energy and body heat, while the rescue teams do what they're supposed to do. Unless you're in hypothermic waters, the best bet is always to just stay afloat without trying to swim somewhere else. This information about falling overboard, hypothermia and conditions, survival at sea, etc. is based on my own experience of 12 years sailing on a merchant ship. Okay, this isn't the most exotic and interesting of these, but if you're walking alone at night, putting a key between each finger with the thought of punching someone and impaling them on 3 keys is useless. you're much more likely to hurt the webbing on your fingers since the grip you have on each key will be very weak. Instead, put a single key between your thumb and forefinger, parallel to your thumb, and make a fist. This still isn't a great defense, but it's an improvement over simply a fist. Also, don't try to kick a man in the crotch unless you have an amazing shot, in which case you're probably better off running away. If you miss or don't kick hard enough, both of which are more likely in the case that you're panicking, you're just going to cause mild discomfort and make them more angry. There was a girl I knew in college who got attacked. She took the whole handful of keys with the keys coming out the bottom of her fist and just went to town on the guy's face. It worked and the guy was arrested because the facial injuries made him pretty easy to recognize. Probably not the best tactic, but hard object plus adrenaline got the job done. Poison ivy isn't just washed off with water and soap, it almost leaves a sap-like residue on your skin. Wash the area and wipe off the residue, never reusing the same part of the cloth. Imagine wiping grease off your skin, it's much the same. You can avoid some nasty rashes and immune responses if you do it correctly. It can make a huge difference outdoors. The YouTube videos on how to unarm an attacker from close range. You will die before you can yell yee-haw. If you haven't trained extensively in real self-defense, you should never try to fight an armed opponent. Just give them what they want or run. These videos usually have the person letting the moves be put on them very easily. In reality, a lot of these moves need to be executed at extremely fast speed with practiced precision. Otherwise, you'll just end up in a wrestling match against someone with a knife, which usually doesn't end well. Yeah, I think the more training and experience one gets in this sort of thing, the more one just accepts how screwed you probably are if you get attacked. Muggers generally wait for a decent-looking target and advantageous situation so that they know that the odds are with them. The narrator has tried a few different martial arts classes, and all they've really done is reinforce how absolutely screwed I am if someone jumps me in an alleyway. When you're lost or stranded, the first mistake is to look for food and water before having a shelter up to keep yourself dry and warm. When I say shelter first, that includes having a fire too. When you're wet and exposed to the elements, your core body temperature can drop and you can get hypothermia if it gets too cold, and you'll burn more calories than necessary. A big reason for building a shelter too is to also keep yourself off the ground, because the ground is an infinite heat sink, which means you'll lose your body heat way faster than you'd think, and you'll be exposed to the cold and elements. And yes, it is good to be near a water source, but remember that it's always colder around rivers, streams, lakes, and oceans. Make sure you're able to easily gather shelter and fire material within the area, plus finding a prime location to set up shelter. If you ever find yourself in snake country, make as much noise as possible. Most people want to avoid snakes, so they stay quiet, but they're more scared of you than you are of them. Talk loudly, stomp, but obviously keep an eye and ear out for any fellas who don't want you to be there. Except for the death adder, which will just lie there and ignore 19 people stepping over them, and then bite the 20th one who had the bad luck to step on it. My source? I'm Australian, we know these things. Wear a seatbelt. There's myths about it being bad if you go into a lake or there's a fire, but first, that's an incredibly tiny proportion of car crashes, and then if you're in that situation, you're far more likely to be knocked out and die of inaction if you're not wearing your seatbelt. I know that this is a mundane tip, but you're far more likely to be in a life-threatening car crash than be stabbed or be falling in an elevator. Wear your seatbelt. If you have to forage for food, avoid mushrooms entirely. The odds are so slim that you'll find an edible kind that you're much better off looking for things like nuts, seeds, and berries. They also hold negligible amounts of calories, so even if you are knowledgeable about fungi, it still doesn't seem worth it. Guess the only scenario where you might go for it is if you have knowledge on edible mushrooms and stumble upon a grove full of them. Too many times I've seen the advice that if you input your PIN backwards in an ATM, it'll withdraw money, but that it'll also be stuck and the police will be notified in the event of a robbery. That's completely false, and you could get killed or seriously hurt if you play dumb like you don't know your PIN. This is an anecdote, but I know a guy who was held up at an ATM. The robber made the mistake of holding him up before he entered his PIN. He was a quick thinker and just kept entering the wrong PIN on purpose, and acted more and more frustrated that it wasn't working. After the third try or whatever that cancelled the transaction, he could hear the guy run off behind him. Now, me? My life isn't worth $400. I would have just let the guy have the money. Never go to a second location with anyone robbing you, though. If they're bothering with that, the plan is most likely for you to be dead afterwards. Gradually loosening an applied tourniquet over time is a thing I still see in first aid training videos for some reason. Just don't do that, guys. Once the tourniquet is on, remember what time it was applied and mark the person if you can, and leave the rest to doctors in a stable environment. Loosening a tourniquet may result in blood loss returning, which requires retightening it. Tightening and loosening repeatedly may cause, on top of additional blood loss, blood to pool up inside the limb, which can cause even more damage. If done right, a tourniquet should hurt like a motherfricker, and you're going to want to loosen it, but in the words of Egon Spengler, it would be bad. Rescue breaths are wildly overrated in most TV and movies. You'll see someone in cardiac arrest, and the rescuer will stop giving compressions and focus on breathing into a person's mouth, and blammo! Awake, alert, alive. Nope, don't do that. Your body does store a fairly decent amount of oxygen in its blood at all times. If someone in front of you ODs and their mouth is covered with saliva or vomit, or they collapse in front of you of a suspected cardiac arrest, your plan of action should be twofold. 1. Are they breathing, and do they have a pulse? This is easy to mess up, especially in a moment of panic. My rule as an EMS provider is that if you don't feel it in 10 seconds, it's not there. So start compressions. If they're not in cardiac arrest, they'll let you know, and the law covers you under Good Samaritan clauses in most cases. And second, if you're the only person attending this body, don't stop and give rescue breaths if help is on the way and will be there soon. It takes about 4 to 7 decent compressions to get blood recirculating in the body after stopping to give mouth to mouth. That's a lot of blood, carrying a lot of vital oxygen reserves that aren't making it to the brain. Obviously, if you're a long way out from help and feel safe to do so, give rescue breaths, but it should never be priority number 1. By the way, if you hear ribs crack, make a face or vomit noises if you have to, tell the person their bones are frickin' grossing you out, but don't stop those compressions. Because what are compressions? That's right, they're number frickin' 1. If you get stabbed by anything, don't pull it out since it could be the thing preventing you from bleeding out. Instead, immobilize it and go to the hospital where they can stop the bleeding when they remove it. You don't need to wait 24 hours to report a missing person. If you think someone is missing, report it as such. The faster a missing person report is filed, the greater the chance the person will be found, especially if it's a child. Missing children are at a high risk during the first 24 hours, especially if abducted. People think that herbivorous animals are friendly and peaceful, so you're safe being around them and their presence will show you where food is. Seriously, everything from cows to deer can and will kill you if you make it angry. It's usually a good idea if you're in the wilds not to get near any large wild animals, but herbivores can often be even more aggressive than the predators. If a predator attacks you, you only have a fairly good chance of scaring it off, especially if it's smaller than you, because it's likely only looking for food. If a herbivore attacks you, you're screwed because it genuinely wants you to die. That's a pretty good way of putting it. If it's a predatory animal, then it's probably capable of finding something smaller and easier to eat if you put up anything resembling a spirited fight or chase. If a cow or bull is trying to run you down, then it's a frickin' vendetta and it will follow you all the way home if it can. People say follow flying birds to find water. Those birds could simply be flying to spend a night somewhere or mate, so we can't rely on them. Fish are the ones you should follow to find water. Don't eat snow to stay hydrated if you're in a winter survival situation. Losing the heat to snow while eating it is more dangerous than dehydration. Heat it up or let it melt in a container first to lose less heat. It won't kill you, but don't pee on a jellyfish sting. It will actually release more of that toxin. You can pee directly on the jellyfish to show dominance. That's for stinging my wife. Contrary to what Fallout New Vegas would have one believe, you can hydrate from soda. If that's all you have, drink it. Sticking your finger up a dog's butt. I've read this a few times. It's not a good idea. The best way to deal with a dog attack is to try to move away slowly, sideways with your arms at your sides so that you're not threatening. Don't look at the eyes and don't smile because both of those are seen as a challenge. Don't run away because the dog will instinctively chase you. Get high up if you can because dogs don't climb very well. And if crap really hits the fans, do the opposite of looking unthreatening. Stand tall with your arms in the air and growl or roar. If there's something nearby, throw it at the dog to make it think twice. Wrap clothing around your arm to hand to the dog should it go in for a bite. You're pretty much guaranteed to be bit, so make it in a place that's less important and less likely to bleed out. Don't lose your footing or fall on the ground. If that happens, you're toast. Don't pull away from the dog if it's already bitten you because this will cause more damage. Once the dog has bitten you, it probably won't let go. Aim to kill or maim the dog. Fingers in the eyes are good. Jumping on the dog with all your body weight is even better. If you break their ribs, they'll probably give up. Staying away from aggressive dogs, all told, is your best bet. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, linked below. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Cotton wicks moisture. Cotton is probably the worst material to wear in an outdoor survival situation because it holds moisture and in doing so, loses its ability to keep you warm. Punching a shark in the nose. As a diver, there was a joke that we're supposed to use our dive knives for shark attacks. We'd cut our dive buddy and swim away, hoping the shark would get them first. One myth I've heard was that moss only grows on the north side of trees. This is, of course, false. A lot of Southeast Asians believe that going from heat to aircon, jumping in a swimming pool on a hot day, or even going near a fan could kill you. So many deaths happen every year because people are afraid of being shocked to death from going to hot to cold too quickly. You shouldn't just drink alcohol to stay warm. You sweat, your blood rushes to your skin, and you'll freeze and die that bit quicker. That you can eat what animals eat. That's not true. Animals have different digestion systems that aren't the same as humans. Sucking a snake bite. That will often make it worse. What you want to do is stop the venom from traveling from the side of the bite onto the lymphatic system and then into the bloodstream. Do not suck, cut, wash, or otherwise investigate the wound. Don't try to catch or kill the snake. Identifying the kind of snake is not worth the risk of a second bite and the delay in getting to your other priorities. Priority 1 should be to get away from the snake. Priority 2, get help, like getting someone nearby to call an ambulance or worst case scenario, call yourself. Sorry, that was a joke. And priority 3, stay still. Moving your muscles is what helps pump the fluid through your lymphatic system to the lymph nodes, where it can enter the bloodstream the quickest. Ideally, keep the bite below your heart, but immobilization is the most important thing. And priority 4, if there's someone else with you, get them to apply a pressure dressing to tightly compress the whole limb. This can greatly slow the flow of lymph and buy you hours. Removing a bullet is more dangerous than leaving it in. Trying to remove it can tear vital organs, it can be pushed in even deeper, or removing it can cause the person to bleed out. The closest I can think of is bracing yourself if you're about to be in an accident. Try to go limp. You're more likely to walk away with minor injuries if you go limp. That's how drunk drivers survive crashes. One I know of is the myth that you can drink water from a cactus. It's mostly false. You can only drink from a small minority of cacti without having certain health consequences that I'm aware of. Oh, I've got a couple. Basic wilderness survival is required to be taught where I live. First, don't drink your pee if you're thirsty. It's high in salt and will make you more dehydrated, just like ocean water. Eating snow where you're thirsty is also bad. It lowers your core temperature and you can become hypothermic. Don't play dead with all bears. It depends on the bear. Some will definitely mess your crap up if you play dead. If it's a grizzly, stand your ground and back up slowly, and if it becomes irritated, get into the fetal position and cover your neck and play dead. If it's a black bear, throw rocks and sticks at it and make a lot of noise. From my experience, black bears are skittish and run away. If it's a polar bear, back away slowly to safety, and if it attacks, pray they kill you fast enough. Defend yourself by any means necessary. Remember to always carry bear spray or a gun if you're in bear country. Don't stand underneath doorways in case of earthquakes. Doors and door frames are just not made the same anymore, so you're more likely to sustain serious injuries if you do. You're better off staying hidden underneath a desk or table. I know it's not what they intended, but this comment makes it seem like we're actively hiding from the earthquake, like a game of hide and seek, which is an image so bizarre that it makes me kinda giggle. Apparently, some people think the best way to survive a wolf attack is to bend down and show the wolf you're submissive towards him and pose no threat. If you do that, you're dead. The wolf will 100% kill you. Your best way is to walk away without turning your back on them, maintaining eye contact the whole way. If you look away or turn your back, the wolf's killer instinct will kick in and it will kill you. Don't make a lot of noise and aggressive movements towards the wolf the same way you'd do to a black bear, because most likely it'll be seen as a challenge, not a threat. Trying to outrun a tornado is about the worst possible thing you can do in a tornado situation. Take shelter. Get underground, go into an interior room, lay in a ditch while covering your head if you have to. Tornadoes are basically like 3-year-olds throwing temper tantrums, except instead of toys, it's cars, buses, and trains they're throwing around. But also toys too, which they can throw hard enough to literally pass through your body. A vehicle of any kind is about the last thing you want to be in when a tornado comes through. And sure enough, I've got people telling me that, nuh-uh, you can totally outrun a tornado because storm chasers do it all the time, and tornadoes only move like 30 miles per hour. Which is objectively false, but their top speed is more like 70 miles per hour. But don't listen to a random idiot like me on the internet. The CDC says, if you're in a car, do not try to outrun a tornado, but instead find the nearest sturdy building. And the NOAA has this to say: vehicles are extremely risky in a tornado. There is no safe option when caught in a tornado in a car, just slightly less dangerous ones. If the tornado is visible far away and traffic is light, you might be able to drive out of its path by moving at right angles to the tornado. Seek shelter in a sturdy building or drive underground if possible. I hope that discerning listeners will work out that what they're advising here is not to try to outrun the tornado, but that you don't need to get out of your vehicle if you're very far away. And finally, the National Weather Service says, being in a vehicle during a tornado isn't safe. The best course of action is to drive to the closest shelter, and if you're unable to make it to a safe shelter, either get down in your car and cover your head, or abandon your car and seek shelter in a low-lying area such as a ditch or ravine. So in short, never try to outrun a tornado, and anyone who ever tells you otherwise is objectively wrong and spreading dangerous misinformation. End of rant. One thing you see a lot in older movies and even today is to conserve your water if you're in a desert or if you lack water. Never do that. If all you do is drink enough to stop being thirsty, the water won't reach necessary organs and parts of your body. Over time, you'll be underhydrated and can suffer the effects of dehydration without ever feeling thirsty. The best usage of your water is to drink at set intervals, even if you're not thirsty. Also, don't drink large amounts all at once because your body won't be used to it, and more of it is going to be wasted via urination than if you space out reasonably sized swigs throughout the day. In the same vein, if you're ever hiking, working, or going to be outside in hot and dry climates, leave the shorts and tank top at home, and instead go for thin and loose-fitting long-sleeve shirts and pants. The big threat to your health is the sun. Avoid direct sun exposure wherever possible. Sunblock is solid enough for shorter trips, but you're going to be sweating off even the best stuff, so be sure to constantly reapply when directed, or if your skin gets too wet. Loose-fitted clothing also helps slow down how fast your sweat will evaporate into the air. Normally, you want to have sweat evaporate as that's how your body will lose the excess heat, as the sweat will draw away heat from your body and cool you down when the wind hits you. But in this scenario, you're losing sweat too fast for your body to transfer much, if any, heat, as the sun is hot enough to evaporate your sweat as soon as you start sweating. Limiting your evaporation also stops you from wasting a ton of water via constantly sweating, which is one of the biggest factors of the water loss you should avoid. I watch a lot of fight videos in all the popular places of the internet like Reddit street fights, and one of two things pretty much always happens when someone gets knocked out. Either their friends come and try to pick them up, shake them and slap them on the face to regain consciousness, or they're left there on their back while people film and laugh and say, "Ho-ho, you got knocked the frick out." These are both bad things to do because that person has just suffered possible serious trauma to the head, especially if they smacked it on the pavement when they came down. So shaking them awake isn't a great thing to do. It might seem like leaving them be to recover on their own is a better idea, but it's not always because they run the risk of choking on their tongue. The best thing to do is to put them in the recovery position, which will make sure they don't have problems breathing until they regain their bearings, and if they don't after a while, it's a safe way for them to be until medical help comes. You cannot drive big boulders, and the pioneers have in fact not been riding those babies for miles. If you try jumping in a malfunctioning falling elevator at the very second it smashes into the ground, you'll still die. Don't put severed body parts in ice, it'll practically give the dead tissue frostbite, thus making it near impossible to reattach. That the first thing you should do when ending up in a survival situation is to look for food or water. On average, you can survive 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water. Instead, you first need to pay attention to your attitude. Panicking and using a negative mindset will get you killed. Being positive and celebrating your survival will help you make it out alive. A shelter to keep you warm helps as well. Most of the crap that Bear Grylls does. I think that Bear gets a bad rep, actually. In survival, you have to decide which is likely to kill you first and deal with that first. Often the first and hardest decision you have to make is the decision to stay put or self-rescue. Bear always chooses to self-rescue, which may not always be the best choice, but that's what the show is. For staying put, Les Stroud is your man. Curing an eye infection with your urine is dangerous. Let me repeat that. Do not under any circumstances put urine in your eyes. Head to the doctor. Even waiting it out is better. When did someone flee the cops and get away scot-free? I was trespassing in the park after dark with some friends. 2 police officers showed up and flashed their lights, so we ran around a baseball field to get away. We noticed they were following us, so we all hid under those orange construction barrels you see along the highway. Minutes felt like hours to a young teenager running from the long arm of the law. This was early 2000s in a suburb in the United States. This was a house party in high school, about 30 or 40 kids in the basement drinking and smoking. Suddenly, cops walked down the stairs. Someone just let them right in. They took underage drinking very seriously. If caught, you got a minor in possession ticket. Fine and court fees were between $300 and $500, so like 30 tickets that night would net the county quite a bit of cash. In our state, we'd had a lot of kids showing up in hospitals with alcohol poisoning around that time, so maybe they were trying to help? They tell us to sit tight and nobody go anywhere. Cops walked back upstairs, we were all wasted. I finagled a window open and helped my friends and a couple of brave souls up and out. I got out, run for a fence, and my friends just hopped. A cop grabs me and hauls me back into the house. He neglected to put me back in the basement, though. It's my friend's house, so I pretended to belong. I opened the fridge, grabbed a Mountain Dew. A cop walks in with a bag of 100 breathalyzer tubes. I meander into the living room by the front door. I wait for the clear, casually walk out the front door. I make it 3 steps and a spotlight hits me. A cop yells at me. I meander back in, just by the front door. Spotlight turns off, I wait 5 seconds, and frickin' bolt out the front door again. Leap off the front porch, sprint through front yards for 4 blocks until I'm in a field. I lay flat and call for my friends. Cops patrol by with a spotlight and can't see me. They go back to their house. A friend picks me up. I have a lot of these. We were really good at almost getting caught for stupid crap. In short, escaped a house party surrounded by cops. I was riding a motorcycle without a license. There was a checkpoint in front of me and the cops waved me to the side of the road. I took a U-turn over the median and gunned it. Didn't look back and I was scared of them showing up at my house for like a week, but they never did. Well, that was a gamble. I feel like you risked a lot more by taking that chance, especially since they could have likely taken your license plate and got you more additional charges on top of that. Don't do this, kiddos. Oh boy, one I can finally contribute to. This one was a while back. I'm 32 now, so this had to have happened when I was like 13 or 14 maybe. Anyway, a bunch of my friends and I had gathered to play Manhunt. Essentially, hide and seek with teams, except we went all out. We wore all black, played at night, and definitely hid in places where we shouldn't have hid. We're talking neighbors' backyards, under their cars, among other things. Anyway, everything was going great this night. We were all having tons of fun. I got made, and had to ditch the current spot I was in and started heading out towards an intersection in my neighborhood. Out of nowhere, I heard a speeding car slamming on the brakes. Then I heard a booming voice go, "Get on the ground, now!" Oh, frick. I instantly turned heel and booked it back down the street that I'd come from. I heard footsteps gaining on me and I got super nervous, but the cop must have seen someone else in closer proximity because he turned 90 degrees and started chasing them. I was still running for my damn life when I heard, "Hey, John, over here!" I turned to the right to see my best friend hiding under a van in someone's driveway, so I jumped under there with him. We hid there for 2 more minutes, but more and more cop cars were just showing up all the time, and I heard him say, "Man, frick this," and he took off, just jumping fences into the backyards of houses leading back to his place. So I followed suit. Somehow we made it and he gave me a change of clothes, a white t-shirt and a white hat, and told me I had to go because his parents were getting suspicious. Luckily, the game of Manhunt had started at his house, so my bike was there. I definitely rode my bike home the long way. On my way home, I saw the cops looking through bushes and yards with canine units and flashlights, but because I was wearing essentially all white and on a bike, I guess I didn't fit the description of the guys they were looking for. Let me tell you, they even brought a chopper out on the search. Funny part is that everyone that got caught and rounded up was sat on the curb literally across the street from my house. So I saw my friends in handcuffs as I rode by. I was terrified that they'd rat me out for some reason, but they didn't. My parents still give me crap for that one. They naturally were worried that I'd end up one of the ones in handcuffs. The reason the cops went all out like that was because someone had reported that they had someone on their roof, and they thought we were attempting to break in. We weren't. We weren't about that life. We just went really hard when it came to Manhunt. Pretty sure that's the last time we played that game. I was in the military as medical on a training course. Nearly all of us were normally civilian doctors and nurses with limited real military training as far as combat readiness goes. Part of the course was a nighttime escape and evade exercise that was basically hide and seek in the woods. They flew over a helicopter for noise distraction and taught us some of the fundamentals. Then gave us a red card and informed us that there were US Marines out there looking for us. They got rewarded for collecting red cards from every idiot that they detected. We had 2 hours to cross the woods and reach our lighted tower without being spotted. The winner was a guy who just walked to the light tower without hiding while loudly muttering about the stupid fricking Marines and the stupid training exercise, and he just wanted to have a cheeseburger. All the Marines assumed that he was already detected and had his card pulled, and they focused on idiots like me trying to actually sneak around. He walked up to the officer at the light tower and handed in his red card for victory. I'd just gotten off the highway, driving 70, and was on this frontage road and was still in the fast driving mode. A cop goes by in the opposite direction, and I immediately looked at my speed and saw that I was doing 65 in a 45 zone. I wasn't speeding on purpose, just in kind of a cruise. I see him slow down. My destination wasn't far away, so I put the hammer down just in time to see him pull a U-turn. I got up to about 90 before I had to pull into the place I was going. They had the garage door open already. I pulled in and jumped out and slammed the door down. My friends were giving me the "care to explain yourself" face, just in time to see the cops fly past at about 90 with lights on. I waited about 6 hours before I went home. I was 17 and drinking at a bar known for serving minors. There were 4 of us near the entrance. A cop enters and grabs the 2 closest people by the arms. I turned around and calmly headed for the back door. Once I hit the back door, I ran as fast as I could for about 15 seconds, then dove down and lay as flat as I could and put my head down. The bar was on the back edge of town, and behind it was a field with really tall bushes and foliage. The cop came back and flashed his light around. He kept on repeating, "I see you, get up." I was hoping he was bluffing, so I stayed down, and luckily, I was correct. I felt pretty dumb after finding out the other kids who got caught were just told to go home with nothing more than that. Ended up going to a massive kegger, like 500 people, in the middle of nowhere, Iowa. Shortly after we arrived, about 10 or so sheriffs showed up and began getting plate numbers and handing out public intox tickets and MIPs. I hopped in my trusty little 93 Geostorm and waited for the sheriff by the field entrance to get a little ways away from his vehicle before slapping it into first and dumping the clutch. I made it about a half-mile from my friend's house before I looked up and spotted the cherries in my rearview mirror. At this point, I figured there was no point in running, so I conceded and pulled over. Turns out that particular sheriff was just on his way to a separate call. Biggest sigh of relief ever. Look, I feel like this entire video could end up just being me saying "don't do this" over and over again, so let's just marvel at the 600-kilo weight that would lift off your shoulders, going from being certain you were about to get a resisting arrest charge to getting away scot-free in your crappy little car. A party got busted on spring break, and I boogied out the back door when the cops were filing everyone else out the front. I hopped a fence and ran into a neighborhood security man who was quite out of shape. He asked if I was running from the cops, as the blue lights flashed behind us. I said, "Of course not." He asks for my ID, and I promptly turned heels and ran again. This is where it gets good though. Drunk me decided that I needed to run in zigzags to dodge any taser shots, and sure enough, I cut to my right, and the taser line hits the ground next to me. Turned my head to see the fat guard's mouth open, and I ran 2 miles back to my hotel room. Safe and sound. When I was about 16 to 17 years old, I was walking home one night after a party with some friends, and the cops pulled up alongside us. They got out and immediately started searching us and asking what we were doing out so late. Everyone had green herb on them, but we ditched it as soon as they pulled, except me. I had mine like a stash pocket in my hoodie. It would have been too obvious to dig it out and dump it, so I just played it cool and left it in. When the cop searched me, he kinda just did a half-assed pat-down. We hadn't really done anything wrong, and our IDs showed that we lived in the area, so they just kinda got back in their cars and drove off. Everyone was pretty bummed out about ditching their herb, so I didn't say anything until we got back to my buddy's house. When we walked through the door, I just pulled it out and held it up in the air. Everyone was stoked and I was pretty chuffed with myself. And we had a great time smoking it. The end. I was at a college party that got busted by the cops. They were in the apartment, on the second floor, giving out underage drinking tickets one by one. I went out to the balcony where there was a group of a couple of dozen students and one cop outside on the ground level. I tried getting some people together to make a go of jumping down and legging it, perhaps only one person getting nabbed, but people were just too hesitant. So I ended up going for it solo anyway. I landed near the cop, recovered from the drop, and ran for all I was worth, jumping fences for a few blocks. I heard the cop's footsteps at first, but he didn't want to go too far to leave the balcony unsupervised. Found out from someone later that he'd thrown his flashlight at me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. One night I was driving too fast and I saw the police officer clock me and pull out after me, so I pulled over into a parking lot to get my ticket. The police officer sped down the road that I'd turned on, I guess assuming that I'd tried to speed away. I was 19 at the time and sitting on the couch, very drunk. I hear a knock on the door and immediately after they say, "Run, kids, run! It's the cops!" I looked left and saw flashlights. I was thinking, "Frick!" and started to run and realized I didn't have my shoes. So I ran back for my shoes and saw my friend Matt get grabbed by the cops, but he frickin' Zoidbergs out of his hoodie and the cop is in a moment of disbelief. I got my shoes and started running for the fence. This isn't a normal fence, it's one of those 7 or 8 foot monstrosities, and I'm only 5'8". I jumped and my hands hit the top and my foot hits that middle piece on the fence. I was over that thing in 2 swift motions and I heard other kids colliding into the fence trying to get over. Only 3 of us made it. Everyone else was screwed aside from one. That one guy hopped a side fence instead and hid under a grill cover. That was a great night. About 15 of us hanging out with some friends at a local elementary school at night, smoking some Mary J and just shooting the crap. One of the guys yells, "Cops!" I had a bowl in my hand, freshly packed, so me being young and scared, I threw it and jumped into some bushes like everyone else. Couple of minutes later, a guy starts laughing, telling us he was joking and then asked where the bowl was. I was like, "Yeah, nah, I've got no idea. You go look for it now." I outran a cop while I was on a motorcycle. I took back alleys, knew the area well. I was riding an enduro on the oil fields. The police don't like that. Speeding to my friend's house, past a cop, probably going 30 over the limit. I say, screw it, and floor it. Onto my friend's street, pull into his driveway, and I was able to hide my car behind his mum's while the cop goes flying by. I was 16 and a complete idiot. I got away 2 more times after that before I realized I should never do it again. I was wandering the Golden Gate Park at 2 a.m. with some people I met earlier. We were looking for what they called a renegade. It was just a large group of people surrounding a car on a hill with a DJ set up in the trunk. Everyone was high and drunk, etc., and later some guy yells, "5-0!" It was at the park with a large public soccer field and 2 squad cars came rushing down the field. The road behind the field curves around and soon we saw 4, 5, 7 squad cars surrounding the area. It wasn't even that big of a party when I was there, but once we started running away, we saw crap loads of people running away too. I guess they shut it down right as it started. That was pretty epic though. Seeing a Mad Max car mob of squad cars driving fast as frick to surround this small hill, they really added to the vibe with all those red and blue strobes. Okay, so for this story I did get caught. Speeding past an oncoming cop, turning down a block or so and down another street and then an alley, then pulled in behind someone's garage and shut the vehicle off. 5 minutes later, they pulled in behind me, got out and came up to the window and said, "Nice try, kid." I said, "Thanks," and got my ticket. Come on, commenters, you're not helping my case that we shouldn't try this. You didn't even get an evading arrest charge. For the record, I feel like 9 out of 10 cops would make your life way worse if you pulled this. Used to live right by a lake. Every night we'd go smoke at this crappy beach that you had to climb rocks to get down to. Really safe spot, but not much of a view. A few blocks down, there was an actual city park with a nice beach at the end and an absolutely gorgeous view of the Toronto skyline. It was so wonderful I mentioned to the others how dumb we were for never using this spot. So we start setting up the pipe and spreading our stuff out when my roommate says, "Dude, I think the cops are here." I'm usually the paranoid one who says that, but this time I turned to him and laughed, "Nah man, you're just paranoid." And then I turned to the parking lot to see a cop flying up the end of it. We were smoking illegally and trespassing since it was after the park closed, so we instantly booked it. There's a setup of large rocks around the lake, and I'm holding the backpack, pipe, and grinder as I run across them and then just start throwing everything down behind the rocks as I'm running. We ran about a block on these rocks and hid under a tree for 40 minutes. We went back home, but we weren't quite done. If we just left our stuff on the rocks, some other dropout would take it in the morning. So we went back a couple of hours later and I fell in the lake trying to recover all of my stuff. I got everything back except the grinder. I was 16, smoking green herb in the park with friends. The cops show up. Frick this, I'm out. I'm a heavy dude and not very athletic, but the combined power of Mary J and adrenaline turned me into a machine. Sudden problem though, one of the group members that I don't know very well was in front of me. If I suddenly turn in the muddy yard, I'll fall. If I suddenly stop in the muddy yard, I'll also fall. Screw it. Too high, I don't give a crap. They'll never take me alive. I push her into the mud and dead sprint all the way back to my friend's house. Not completely sure why, but she never hung out with us again after that. I was speeding down the interstate like 90 in a 65 zone. Saw the cop pull out as I passed. Luckily, there was a rest area half a mile ahead. So I floored it to the rest area and pulled in. Quickly got out of my car and walked in. They can't pull you over if you aren't in a vehicle, and he doesn't know what I look like, so I'll wait inside. I see the cop pull up and he's waiting behind a truck. Well, it was about an hour before their shift changed, so I figure, screw it, I'll wait this guy out. 30 minutes later, he leaves. I give it another 30 to be safe and then left myself. Didn't get pulled over. First time was back when I was about 14 or 15 years old. A friend of mine insisted on going to the local park to smoke a roll of the devil's lettuce. He said he did it all the time, despite my concern. Did it anyway because stupid, but as we baked ourselves to outer space, I noticed a figure walking towards us that looked like a guy walking his dog. Turned out to be a cop, with no dog, but far away enough for me to tell my friend with what little sense I had left to get slowly back on his bike and start making our way towards the end of the park by the canal. The park was in a clearing, so we hung a left into the woods. I convinced him to dump what was a week's worth of herb and make it to the nearest intersection, where 3 cop cars pulled up and searched our butts. Technically, we did get caught, I guess, but we didn't have anything on us, so they took our names and addresses and went on their merry way. The second time was on the highway, doing about 90 on the far left lane, but on a section that curved right. So by the time I saw the state troopers, it was too late, and I'd committed to my speed for a bit past the curve. I saw him start turning around to come get me, but I just casually slowed down and started making my way to the far right lane. By the time I got there, a semi was pulling up to the lane on my left, so I used him to keep me out of line of sight from the cops and slowed to 65. I switched lanes to be behind him as the cops passed ahead, and then went back around on his left as the cops floored it to the closest exit, thinking I must have bailed off the highway. Great success. I was 19 at the time, so the stupid crap is well and truly over these days, let me tell you. Mine was the wildest date ever. We had just left a local music festival, and on the way back to his place, we noticed a squad car edging out after us. My date tells me his plates are expired, and before I can even wrap my head around it, he hangs a right, hooks another, slams into park, and climbs out. I fly out after him just as the squad car comes down the street. Without a word, he grabs my hand and we run. We hop a waist-high gate into someone's yard, duck through the bushes into an alley. We must have run for a half-mile before we decided it was safe to walk back. The cop probably rolled his eyes and took off when he saw us book it, but bless his little heart, that scare, that moment of teenage irresponsibility, was one of the most exciting and romantic evenings of my life. I married him, by the way. Things have settled down a little bit now that we can afford to keep the car registered. Good to hear that you're both model citizens now, at least with regards to your vehicular activities. What can I say? This sort of danger is very exciting on a first date, I suppose. Although for some it could be a slippery road to being an adrenaline junkie chasing that next thrill. Was that last brush with the law enough? Who knows? It was 9 p.m. and I was going well over 110 miles per hour. A few cars spread out, but no traffic. I passed a cop, didn't see him until I passed, and I didn't let off. I saw his headlights turn on, and over his head, blue and reds go on as he goes onto the roadway from where he was hiding. I got to a bend in the highway, and right after the bend in the highway, there was an exit. From when I saw the cop to after I got on the exit was about 1.5 miles, I'd assume. When I stopped at the stop sign, a cop went flying onto the on-ramp, I assumed to try and intercept me and get eyes on me. Little did he know I was right behind him, getting off. Nothing too crazy, I just switched the route on my GPS and took back roads for a little while before getting back on. This was on the I-95 south somewhere in Georgia when I was making a trip to Florida. Disclaimer, do not run from the police. If the officer got behind me close, I would have pulled over. I was a lanky middle school kid smoking herb behind a building in Canada. I ran short-distance track at the time, so I was gone as soon as I saw them taking the corner, and I guess they decided that the chase wasn't worth the effort. We had a neighborhood paintball tournament in a local forest park. Someone thought we had real weapons, I guess, and called the cops. I was the last guy left on my team and heard someone coming up behind me, so I jumped beneath a bush. Turns out it was a cop. Right as I'm about to book it, all 6 of the enemy team ambush the cop thinking it was me and pelt him with at least 20 paintballs, quite a few of them to the face. Their expressions were priceless. One of them screamed, "Cops!" and we all ran like heck. Never got caught, nothing ever came of it, but still scary as heck. We were damn lucky that cop didn't have a piece. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.